Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. This meeting is now being streamed live on the internet.
Dave, I changed around my audio. Can you still hear me?
Sure can. Good afternoon, Supervisor Ellenberg,
Good afternoon, Rhonda.
and good afternoon, Supervisor Chavez.
Hello, Rhonda.
Have a great meeting, Supervisors.
Hello, Madam President.
I was going to say 2-minute warning, Supervisor Wasserman.
Good call. My baseball team's finally resuming today. They've been off for 5 days with a COVID concern, but there wasn't any.
Who's your team?
Cincinnati Reds are my favorite team, and then Giants and A's.
In that order? We
Yeah,
need to have a conversation.
Yes. Yeah, Giants and A's is American League National League, but my dad's Dayton, Ohio. I invited Johnny Bench to my wedding. The rug in my front room is the Cincinnati Reds infield.
Is that right?
Oh yeah, no, I'm way overboard.
That's awesome.
Good afternoon, this is Vietnamese interpreter.
Welcome.
Thank you very much. Welcome to our meeting. Should we need interpretation at that time, feel free to unmute your mic, and you're welcome to use your video or not at that time as well.
Okay, thank you.
Well, hello, everyone. We're going to call our meeting to order. And just as a reminder, this is our August 19th continuation of our budget hearing. I'm going to call the meeting to order, and I'm going to ask if the clerk can call the roll.
Good afternoon, Supervisor Ellenberg,
I'm here.
Supervisor Simidian? We'll come back to Supervisor Simidian. Supervisor Cortese? We'll come back to him. Vice President Wasserman?
Here.
President Chavez?
Here.
Let me go back around. Supervisor Simidian? Supervisor Cortese? Madam President, you do have a quorum.
Thank you. And Dave, I'll keep my eyes open for when they join. Oh, Supervisor Simidian is joining us now. And we'll just give him a minute. Oh, there he is. He's connected. So I just to acknowledge Supervisor Simidian is here.
Thank
And
you.
I think this may be Supervisor Cortese as well. Well, we'll go ahead and begin acknowledging that we have 4 members of our board present, and we're going to now ask Supervisor Wasserman to lead all of us who are able to stand in the Pledge of Allegiance.
Thank you, Madam President. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Madam President, does the flag appear with the stars on the correct corner on your screen, or should it be this way?
Other way.
Okay,
that's correct.
Top left. Good.
Yes. Thank you.
Yep.
So we're now going to move to public comment. This is an opportunity to speak to an item that is within the purview of the committee, but is not on the agenda today. As public speakers line up, I just want to explain to my colleagues that we're going to use the same method we used yesterday, which is we'll get an overview. After we hear from public comment, we'll get an overview. We have a lot of new materials in our packet, so I'm going to have the staff just give a quick overview of what they've given us. We'll go department by department. But prior to us doing that, if there's anything that a member of the board would like to put on consent, we'll do it at that time. Otherwise, we'll take it section by section. So with that, we're now going to go to public comment. I'm going to ask the staff, I'm just going to give it a minute more. And I also just wanted to acknowledge that Supervisor Cortese has joined us.
Noted. Thank you, Madam President.
Thank you. So if there's anybody who would like to speak on public comment, this is to speak to an item that is within the purview of the board, but not on our agenda today. This would be the time to raise your hand. Seeing no more new hands being raised, I'm going to ask if the clerk could begin calling speakers. And I'm just going to give it a minute more because I know sometimes people have a hard time connecting up. So as my colleagues get settled, I'm going to just allow folks who would like to speak under this item to do so. All right, seeing no new hands, we have one more. What I'd like to do is if the clerk could begin calling, and we'll let people join. And at some point, to manage the meeting, I may weigh in there. But in the meantime, may I ask for the clerk to invite people to speak?
Our first speaker is Scott Largent. I am unmuting you. Please accept the unmute. You will have 1 minute to speak. The timer will start when you begin speaking.
Thank you. Good afternoon, everyone. Scott Largent. I'll make this pretty quick. Comments these days with city or county basically gets tacoed down to 30 seconds or a minute. You guys have a really nice woman that works for the county, a little old Asian lady that's been, rocking, taking care of our restrooms here at the county for a long time. She's a good woman. When she shows up to work now, since you guys booted her to evening shift, she's got to go into a bathroom that is the most disgusting thing you've ever seen. So that woman's basically risking her life. Why would Jeff Smith or whoever's in charge boot everybody to evening shift? These bathrooms need to be cleaned throughout the day. We need to just be doing more. And I don't understand it. This restroom's disgusting. The downstairs one's overflowing. Where are the portable showers? Where are the portable restrooms? And of all things today, You know, you walk outside, it's like smoking a pack of cigarettes. Why aren't we handing out masks to the homeless and mentally ill that are out there right now? No water, no masks, no restrooms, no nothing. We leave them to die.
Our next speaker is Molly McLeod. I am unmuting you. Please accept the unmute. You will have 1 minute to speak. The timer will start when you begin speaking.
Hello, my name is Molly McLeod. I'm a member of Surge at Sacred Heart, and I live in Santa Clara County in District 4. I urge the Board of Supervisors to reverse its June 23rd vote and restore full funding for immigrant services during its August 2020 budget revision. Immigrants remain the most vulnerable and most affected by the pandemic. These cuts undermine services that our communities desperately need. Now, more than ever, immigrants should not be asked to bear the brunt of this crisis. Thank you.
Our next speaker is Wendy Ho. I am unmuting you. Please accept the unmute. You will have 1 minute to speak. The timer will start when you begin speaking.
Good afternoon, Supervisors. Wendy Ho with the Silicon Valley Council of Nonprofits. Next week, you will be considering recommendations on the GARE framework to make equitable budget and policy decisions. That framework dictates that communities should be engaged in this process and that information should be analyzed to determine benefit or burden to affected communities. Again, we call on the county to be transparent with the community about the relevant details of the budget, historical revenue and expense trends, and the choices to be made. It is difficult for the community to engage in budget conversations without relevant data. Over time, the county's public budget documents have become increasingly more opaque and inaccessible. We recognize that the county has tough choices to make to close the budget deficit, but we urge you to take the GARE framework to heart and center the voices of the community who will be impacted by your decisions. As partners in the county systems of care, nonprofits should be at the table to help craft these shared solutions on budget shortfalls. Thank you.
Our next speaker is Tracy Weatherby. I am unmuting you. Please accept the unmute. You will have 1 minute to speak. The timer will start when you begin speaking.
Good afternoon. I'm Tracy Weatherby, Vice President of Strategy and Advocacy at Second Harvest of Silicon Valley. We're appreciative of the county looking at how they can best support our food system. Since COVID, we're now providing food to over 500,000 people in conjunction with our over 300 partners. And we're providing 80% more food than pre-pandemic, and we don't expect that need to decline for the next couple of years. We're concerned about the safety net budget reductions now and over the next year, and we hope that the supervisors will create meaningful engagement opportunities around budget decisions using technology, translation, and other creative strategies to center community organizations and client voices in all decisions. Thank you for your partnership to end hunger.
Our next speaker is a phone caller ending in 477. I am unmuting you. Please accept the unmute. You will have 1 minute to speak. The timer will start when you begin speaking. And that person is not unmuting. We'll come back. Our next speaker is Gabriel Manrique. I am unmuting you. Please accept the unmute. You will have 1 minute to speak. The timer will start when you begin speaking.
Good afternoon, Board of Supervisors. My name is Gabriel Manrique, community organizer with Luna and a resident of San Jose. I am very disappointed that the Board of Supervisors decided to reduce the Rapid Response Network's budget. I urgently ask the Board of Supervisors to restore funding to the Rapid Response Network during its August 2020 budget revision. I ask that immigrant services be kept. Now more than ever, immigrants should not be asked to endure the most of this crisis. The Board of Supervisors should show support to our immigrant community in Santa Clara County by restoring funds to the Rapid Response Network. Thank you.
Our next speaker is Mila Romero. I am unmuting you. Please accept the unmute. You will have 1 minute to speak. The timer will start when you begin speaking.
Good afternoon, Board of Supervisors. This is Mila Romero, and I come to you with a special request in your budgeting. If you can kindly please review those who are in housing sectors where the rapid rehousing program is getting ready to end in the middle of a pandemic. And I'm asking if you could please hold the stop on that so they don't get evicted and grant them an extension. In addition, I do believe behavioral health is very important. It's affecting everyone at this time, professionals from our law enforcement to our healthcare, to our children, and to please provide services needed to help persons throughout this pandemic. And I thank you for all of your help and all of your time. And I look forward to all of the wonderful things that you guys are going to do for the people.
Our next speaker is Mary Jane Alvarado. I am unmuting you. Please accept the unmute. You will have 1 minute to speak. The timer will start when you begin speaking.
Hi, my name is Mary Jane Alvarado. I'm a social worker with APS. I've been working for APS since 2017. I work closely with my community, especially those who are individuals and families that have been impacted by this pandemic. These individuals and families that I work with have very limited resources, as well as they've lost their jobs because of the pandemic. So I am a witness to a community that is struggling to meet the demands for the outreach services that I refer to, such as food resources, affordable housing, and available behavioral health. I ask you today, what are your plans to raise the revenues to pay towards these outreach services in our community, because we desperately need them?
Our next speaker is a number ending in 3997. I am unmuting you. Please accept the unmute. You will have 1 minute to speak. The timer will start when you begin speaking. And that individual is not accepting the unmute. We'll move on to the next speaker. Our next speaker is Lorraine. I am unmuting you. Please accept the unmute. You will have 1 minute to speak. The timer will start when you begin speaking.
Hi, my name is Lorraine Julian, and I work as a social worker for Adult Protective Services since 2014. Prior to this, I was a social worker with DFCS and has been serving the County of Santa Clara community for 20 years. As APS social workers, we service the elders in our community, 65 and older, as well as dependent adults. This community is growing rapidly. More elders are baby boomer age, more are racially and ethnically diverse, more were born in other countries, more elders are vulnerable. Every one of us will someday meet the age criteria of an APS client. Can you imagine yourself, your parent, a loved one, a friend being taken advantage of, abused financially, physically, sexually, mentally, or self-neglecting their own needs and have no one to turn to? We are welcome into homes of all sorts of situations. We see what goes on behind closed doors. We witness client shame and hopelessness of the situation. We assist our clients in connecting community services and retaining and honoring their rights to self-determination and autonomy. We are in the heart of Silicon Valley. We need revenue in order to continue and provide these services.
Our next speaker is Gisela Boucher. I am unmuting you. Please accept the unmute. You will have 1 minute to speak. The timer will start when you begin speaking.
Good afternoon. My name is Gisela Boucher. I'm the CEO of Loaves and Fishes Family Kitchen. Proud to have been serving Santa Clara County for the past 40 years. As part of the county executive offices and departments work with community-based organizations in serving the needs of our most vulnerable neighbors, we ask that the county ensure that these offices and departments work closely with those CBOs to make sure that the strategies are truly shared strategies and solutions that really will benefit us for the long term. The pandemic is something that none of us expected, but is something that we're all going to have to deal with for a long time to come. Also, please know that we do recognize that you have a difficult job in having to make some very tough decisions with regard to the budget. But I would ask you to remember that food is that one basic necessity we all share regardless of our circumstances. Loaves and Fishes, we stand ready to work with the county, even though requests for our services have tripled, to ensure anyone in need of a meal gets one in a timely manner. Thank you.
Our next speaker is Susan Fraser. I am unmuting you. Please accept the unmute. You will have 1 minute to speak. The timer will start when you begin speaking.
Good afternoon, supervisors. I'm Susan Fraser with the Institute on Aging's Community Living Connection Program and the Leadership Committee of the Silicon Valley Council of Nonprofits. We are asking you to preserve and prioritize the local safety net and services for people and communities that are most disadvantaged. Given the current and likely sustained economic downturn, the county should avoid cuts and rather make needed strategic investments to the safety net, including those that assist community members in need to more easily access and navigate systems of care and services, and sustain those programs that avoid costly hospitalizations and ED utilization. A number of nonprofit community leaders have recommended public safety related strategies that could result in budgetary savings and in policing and corrections that could be reinvested in community-based poverty prevention programs. These strategies should be considered and no ideas should be off the table. Thank you.
Our next speaker is Elias Madrid. I am unmuting you. Please accept the unmute. You will have 1 minute to speak. The timer will start when you begin speaking. Elias, are you there?
Hello? Hello?
Welcome. We can hear you.
Hi, Board of Supervisors. My name is Elias Madrid, and I'm a volunteer here at 70 West Heading. And the reason I'm bothering you guys today is to let you know that we know that the pandemic has really messed up a lot of things. You know that you leave the doors open to the homeless here so they can come and use the telephones in the restrooms. Well, that's really being abused in here now. And that's the reason I'm saying something. I used to be homeless when I came here. I'm not homeless no more. I got my own place. If somebody can, if I can do it, anybody can do it. But that's not what I'm about right now. What I'm about is these restrooms are getting tore up. The people come in here, the plumber was here this morning and fixed it, and guess what? Somebody went in there and completely threw a whole roll of toilet paper again and messed it up. That's costing you more money. These are plumbers. Please, can we get a porta potties out here? They don't cost that much. That way we can refer them to the porta potties and we can save the restrooms. Thank you for your time, and I hope you take that into consideration.
Our next speaker is Kwake Waddle. I am unmuting you. Please accept the unmute. You will have 1 minute to speak. The timer will start when you begin speaking.
Hello, my name is Elizabeth Gomez, and I am on Guasiwat's time frame. I'm the program manager here at Conexión for the Day Worker Center. Through this pandemic, we've been operating at full capacity. We've been seeing the homeless population come in, looking for jobs and work. We've been giving them 2 meals a day, setting them with bagged lunches, trying to still connect them with employment, case management, trying to get them, even if they could get unemployment, showers, giving them stability, the ability to wash their loads of laundry, still connecting them with all of our services here and under our umbrella with Conexión. So we thank you guys for continuing to support Conexión, and especially our Day Worker Center, so that we can continue to run and function the way that we do. We also offer families food boxes every Wednesday. We've kicked that into gear since the pandemic's hit, and we've been serving over 200 families. And we just want to thank you to continue your support for Conexión Services in the Day Worker Center. Have a great day.
Our next speaker is R. Conda. I am unmuting you. Please accept the unmute. You will have 1 minute to speak. The timer will start when you begin speaking.
Good afternoon, President Chavez and members of the Board of Supervisors. I'm Richard Conda, Executive Director of the Asian Law Alliance and one of your CBO partners. I really want to thank you so much for recognizing the essential role of CBOs in serving the community and in delivering and funding safety net services. I'd like to ask that you include us in the conversation for solutions to the budget deficit. I am concerned about the budget deficit, and as I understand, there may be additional reductions happening in November. I would ask that the county apply a robust race equity lens to the current budget process. Thank you very much.
Our next speaker is Maria Alvarado. I am unmuting you. Please accept the unmute. You will have 1 minute to speak. The timer will start when you begin speaking.
María. Bueno.
Yes. Welcome.
Okay. Hola, me llamo María Alvarado. ¿Sí? ¿Me escucha?
Yes, we're listening. Please go ahead.
Okay. Hola, me llamo María Alvarado.
Oh, so
no. So what?
Do we have the Spanish translator?
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
We do. We have Frank from the clerk's office here to help with Spanish translation. We can have her speak, and then Frank can do the translation after that.
Right. I think, Frank, you need to explain that to María.
¿Sí?
Buenas tardes, María. Me llamo Frank Soriano, soy de la oficina. Usted puede hablar por 1 minuto y yo voy a traducir su mensaje al junta, ¿ok?
Okay. Mi nombre es María Alvarado.
Señora, si quiere, dé su discurso primero, dé su discurso por completo y luego Frank va a traducirlo.
Ok, ¿lo doy todo por completo entonces?
Sí, por favor.
Ok. Hola, mi nombre es María Alvarado y vivo en el condado de Santa Clara. Yo estoy llamando porque recomiendo que los supervisores cambien su voto de junio 23 y decidan a restaurar fondos dedicados a servicios de inmigración. Los inmigrantes siguen siendo los más vulnerables y los más afectados por la pandemia. Estos recortes no ayudan a nuestra comunidad. Ahora, más que nunca, no se deberían pedir a los inmigrantes que se hagan responsables por la crisis. Ellos son los más afectados por esta crisis. Por favor, cambien su voto. Gracias.
Thank you. Frank?
Good afternoon. This is a translation for Miss Maria Alvarado. Hello, my name is Maria Alvarado, and I live in the county of Santa Clara. I'm calling to recommend the Board of Supervisors to change their June 23rd vote and restore funds to immigration services. Immigrants are the most vulnerable and are affected by the pandemic. These budget cuts don't help us, and we shouldn't be asking immigrants to bear the brunt of the burden. This concludes the translation. Thank you.
Thank you, Frank.
Our next speaker is Adriana Luna. I am unmuting you. Please accept the unmute. You will have 1 minute to speak. The timer will start when you begin speaking. Adriana, are you there? Adriana does not appear to be accepting the unmute.
There she goes.
Oh.
Hi, my name is Adriana Luna. I'm a Master of Social Work student as well as a community organizer. I urge the Board of Supervisors to restore the funding for immigrant services during its August 2020 budget revision. We understand that the county faces an unprecedented budget crisis and ask that at the minimum, sorry, I'm out of breath, immigrant services be kept. Now more than ever, immigrants should not be asked to endure the most of this crisis. Thank you.
Thank you.
Our next speaker is the number ending in 3997. I am unmuting you. Please accept the unmute. You will have 1 minute to speak. The timer will start when you begin speaking. Looks like that individual is not accepting the unmute. That concludes speakers for public comment, Madam President. Thank you
So much, Dave. All right, so we're going to go back to the board, and so what I would like to do is before we review the rest of the day, I would like the staff to review the documents that were given to us, and then see if there are any questions about that, and then we'll review the rest of the day's packet.
Okay.
Supervisor Chavez, could I request, I realize that we don't generally respond to public comment, but we've had advocates several times on an issue which has been resolved, and I'm not sure, I feel bad that the message has not gotten through, but the funding that people were asking about today and last week has been restored, and I wonder if Miguel Marquez might make a statement to that effect so that it is clear to everyone. Is that all right, President?
Of course.
Thank you.
Sure, thank you. I'm happy to provide that information. Yes, on June 23rd, I think there was a misunderstanding. There was an item on consent calendar that day that authorized $4,897,303 for 23 contracts to 20 different community-based organizations. That does require, if you look on today's agenda, item 121 has a revised recommended action for the balance of the budget that is necessary to fully fund all of those contracts. And with respect to the Rapid Response Network in particular, that has been funded at $495,504. So as you note, Supervisor, those contracts have been funded per the discussions and request and proposal of the CBOs. And again, about $500,000 for the Rapid Response Network, as was done last year. Happy to answer any questions.
Thank you so much. I appreciate that clarification once again, and do hope that that message is spread in as many relevant languages as is appropriate, so that the community understands that we are not defunding these services.
Thank you very much, Susan. So on this item 116, if I could have the staff just review the documents that are in our packets. And I'm not sure, Dr. Smith, if I could turn to you for that.
Sure, I can start out, and then if there's anything else for Greg to talk about, we will. The board asked us for a matrix of referrals that are still pending, and 116A is that matrix. It's 35 pages, 86 or 89, I can't remember exactly. Referrals, it's gone down since last time we talked. They're all listed by what the referral is and who's responsible for it. So hopefully that will help the board in their decisions. Item B is the board asked for the impacts of funded non-vacant positions that were in the budget recommendations, the updated recommendations. I would suggest maybe the board not pay much attention to this right now, because during the discussions from the last 2 days, there have been a lot of suggestions from the board that will change these impacts. So we will come back with an updated version of this document on Friday, which will show different impacts. So this is a memo that would have been relevant if the board adopted the entire recommended budget, but since you haven't, it's probably more confusing than anything. C has to do with vacant positions, is self-explanatory. D is information that has to do with the hearings on the 19th. E and G are 2 memos related to the Juneteenth holiday. I asked for G to be added to the packet today because of some clarity issues, the most significant being the cost. The total cost is 12.9 million. The incremental cost is 2.3, meaning that it would cost us an additional 2.3 of payroll plus the loss of the 10 and some hundred thousands million for lost services. So we would be basically reducing the entire budget or the entire service level by 12.9 million. So I wanted to try to clarify that, the difference between the incremental cost and the total cost. And that's pretty much the information there, unless Greg wants to add something else.
Yeah, to the president, this is Greg Etruria, County Budget Director. Yeah, the only other item on there that we've added is a list of the additional referrals that the board made yesterday. So we have them, so everyone's aware that we're tracking them and we're working on them. Thank you.
Thank you. What I would like to do is I want to see if there are any comments or questions just on item 116 before we go to the process for the rest of the day. And I'm going to start with Supervisor Cortese to see if there are any comments or questions on this item. No?
No.
Supervisor Ellenberg?
No comments.
Supervisor Semidian?
Thank you, Madam Chair. 2 separate and distinct issues. First, a correction, I believe. I am looking at this, I'm on item 116, and I'm looking at the memo from Mr. Ituria, the County Budget Director, dated August 19th, item 2. And this deals with the $400,000 Community Health Services Department. And colleagues, if you can take a minute and find the document either in print or virtually, the language indicates the Board of Supervisors requested that the administration move forward with the county executive's revised recommendation related to the proposed $400,000 budget cut to Community Health Services Department, but instructed to not reduce the contract amount itself, so the maximum financial obligation remains the same. It may just be semantics, but I think it's a real and significant issue. The action of the board, and Supervisor Chavez, if I recall correctly, you actually asked for clarification by me, which I provided, that we were not taking action to approve that item or move it forward. We were simply moving the entire item for consideration to our mid-year budget process. I think that's consistent with everyone else's understanding, only because we talked about it somewhat at length. So I would ask the budget director and his or her team if the board understanding is consistent with my own, to make that change to reflect the action of the board yesterday pursuant to my motion.
And Supervisor Simitian, for clarification, it meant that there would be no action this year to that amount, and that if the staff wanted to bring that back for reconsideration for another time for future budget changes, they could do that.
Slight clarification, Madam Chair. The motion was not if the staff wanted to bring it back, it was move it to the mid-year budget, period, end of story.
Move the concept again, because we were fully funding it this year.
We're gonna fully fund it. Yeah, I mean the administration can, or the board can, always say, all right, we need to take this action mid-year. That's why we have a mid-year budget process. But essentially what it said was continue the item to the mid-year budget process.
Thank you.
Full stop.
Yes, we understood that. I think it's a matter of semantics, but when you see the budget on Friday, we won't have any reductions in those services, and we will have it come back on mid-year.
Thank you. And the other item goes to the clarifying memos, the two memos we received regarding the Juneteenth as a county holiday. Thank you. I thought the memos were very helpful. Appreciate the clarification about the financial implications. I would, however, like to ask staff for some additional information and clarification and correction if need be, and I don't know for sure that it is, but the last paragraph deals with the potential to, quote, swap a current county holiday and commemorate Juneteenth in its place. It says, as previously indicated, the county currently celebrates a total of 12 holidays. All current holidays except for Cesar Chavez Day and the day after Thanksgiving are also federal holidays. This means that these two holidays are the only holidays available to swap. And then it goes on a bit. I would like some clarity about the basis for those statements. I know, for example, here in California, the state of California did not in 2020 celebrate or designate Columbus Day as a state holiday. We have, I think the federal government has 10 paid holidays. The state of California has 11. We have 12. There's a possibility now that we will be considering a 13th. The reason I had mentioned the swap was that 12 is already more than either the state or federal government. And I am looking literally as we speak at the California Department of Human Resources page that indicates that Columbus Day is not a state holiday. So presumably there's some flexibility there if the state didn't have to take it. Dr. Smith, could we just ask you and your team and perhaps the folks at County Council, if need be, to give us clarifying information on that by the end of the week?
Yes, we certainly will. There's a little bit of a disagreement among staff about the exact limitations. So we'll clarify that and have it done by Friday.
Great. Thanks so much. Appreciate it, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Are there any other questions from my colleagues? Seeing none, I actually have a few that I just wanted to go through with the staff. So on the referral matrix, I want to just thank the staff for getting that to us. I just wanted to share with my colleagues, the reason I think this is important is that the referrals that have been approved by the board or are in process of being researched, from my perspective, need to be reflected in the budget and could be reflected even in the strategic analysis that the staff, I hope, will be continuing to undergo as it relates to each department. We received those today, the updated list today. So my office and myself are going to be taking a deeper dive into them to see where there may be some opportunities, hopefully before Friday, relative to recommendations, at least from myself. On items B and C, I do appreciate what Dr. Smith's point about moving targets when it comes to our vacant positions. Part of the reason that I was so interested in the vacant positions is that I do want to better understand the budgetary distinction between or what budgetary tools may be available to create flexibility in the way we are managing our positions. And part of the reason that I want to raise that is I was a little concerned when I heard, Dr. Smith, your comments yesterday relative to overtime as an example, because I know in a number of departments that on different occasions we've had mandatory overtime, sometimes lasting years. And I actually think that may even be still the case for the Department of Corrections. So in any case, part of the reason I'm still looking for the budgetary options is because I do want to make sure we're not just being forced into forced overtime for positions, especially positions that are difficult to recruit, and that we're not deleting positions that are very difficult to both get and then recruit, especially where we have long lead times, particularly in public safety and justice.
So I'm understanding you differently today. Maybe I mistook it yesterday. I think what you're asking for is more of a summary of the position control process and the position allocation process.
Well, I think, Dr. Smith, it's not a different request. I'm acknowledging that you have presented the board with an option, and the option is delete the funded vacant position. And if you don't delete the vacant funded position, if you use a freeze or any other mechanism, does not guarantee the budget savings.
Right.
And what I have had a difficult time understanding is whether or not there are other options to realize the budget savings that still give the organization and the departments some flexibility. That's really the core question. Now, you have stated that it's very easy to bring back a position and that should not deter us from deleting them. And at least a comment I made either yesterday or the day before is that's not been my understanding. If you think it would be educational and helpful for the board to understand the process for bringing back a position, I think that's fine. Maybe that may be of interest to board members. I was really just dealing with that budgetary quandary that you've pointed out to us over the last few days.
Got it.
But thank you, the information was helpful. Lastly, on the Juneteenth memo, I want to make sure I understand the supplemental memo that looked at total cost. When we look at what you're referring to as incremental cost, do you mean that one number is the annual cost? The way, and what I'm really asking is, when we look at the annual cost during contract negotiations, is one of these numbers that cost?
No, the 10 million, which is 12.9 minus 2.3, the remainder 10 plus whatever is money that we would have to spend no matter what, but in exchange for that we would get a day of service and work. So if individuals weren't at work, we still would have to pay that if it was a paid holiday. The 2.3 is incremental costs on top of that, having to do with overtime and the 24-hour services that we provide, which would still have to stay open even during a holiday.
Got it. So whenever we have a holiday, whenever we negotiate a holiday for the whole organization, the cost of that holiday is $10 million plus 2.9 or 2.3 or 2.9. I'm not sure what that number is, but
2.3.
Thank
I'm
you.
getting them mixed up.
No problem. So the unit or the single cost for a holiday is $12 million.
12.9, yes.
Thank you. Oh, it's 12.9? Okay. So it's $12.9 million. And can you remind me the next steps on this item?
I think the next step is the board needs to decide whether they wish to offer that or make that decision. And then at that point, we would sit down with the bargaining units and negotiate that into their MOUs. Because we do, anytime the board takes such an action, there has to be a meet and confer to discuss the impacts of such an action. And, you know, there will be impacts on operations and, you know, it's always a backfilling and various other things that need to be discussed with each of the unions.
And is that an action that can be taken today or on Friday, or is this information coming back in response to Supervisor Cortesi's initial memorandum at the next board meeting?
I'm a little confused about the question. You mean, can you act on what's in there in the agenda today?
Yes.
Yeah, you can act on what's on the agenda today.
I guess what's confusing to me is it's under receiving report versus another action item. That's what's prompting my question. So you're saying under this item, receive report, we could take the action today for the Juneteenth holiday?
You could direct us to come back, you know, as a modification of the budget of the recommended, well, the modified budget that you started out with as a, you know, modification of that modification. We have to come back on Friday with a balanced budget. The board could direct us today to allocate the dollars needed to implement a 13th holiday, yes. So essentially you'd be telling us come back on Friday with a budget that includes that.
Okay, thank you. I just have two more things. I'm sorry for my colleagues. One is that some time ago, the board took an action. I think this was in April of this year. It might have even been April in the year before. Oh, I'm sorry, Supervisor Cortesi. It's on this item.
Yeah, on the item we're just on, I appreciated your inquiries and Dr. Smith's responses. So I'm not sure where on the agenda in terms of a point of order that motion would be appropriate, but I would like to move to ensure that we do have a budget that comes back, or a budget option that comes back as an alternative, including the Juneteenth holiday, you know, with the second option that's listed in the supplemental being the paid observance of the holiday, so that the board has the opportunity to, you know, as we discussed at the board meeting, to make sure we don't get into the budget year without having that that placeholder in the budget, subject to meet and confer and all that good stuff. I don't know how the vote will go ultimately, but I do want to make sure that we have the opportunity to move that direction today or not. And I just don't know where it is where it shows up on the agenda in terms of action.
Yeah, what Dave, that's a good question. That's partly what I was trying to understand, because just because of the board language, it threw me a little bit. I think what Dr. Smith and also James, if this isn't accurate, just jump in. What Dr. Smith is saying is that we could take action under this item to move this action under a holiday or observance, whatever the board wishes, to the Friday meeting. Is that accurate, James?
Let me ask James to comment on it.
Thank you. James, there you go.
Yeah. Yes.
Do you need me to ask the question again?
No, I heard the question.
Okay.
The board what the board could do today is ask that administration on Friday come back with the allocation, and the actual adoption would occur on Friday.
Under this item.
Right. So on this item, the board would ask administration to come back on Friday with the adjustments.
Got it. Okay.
If it's not out of order, I would make that motion.
It would just be a budget allocation, to be clear. The actual establishment of a holiday would be a subsequent action.
Okay. Dave, does that make sense to you?
Yeah, I'm sorry, Supervisor Chavez. I just started saying, if it's not out of order, that's the motion I would like to make, that we refer it in, like we've been doing other items, into the Friday budget, final budget wrap up. So if it's appropriate now, I'll just make that as a motion, essentially what Mr. Williams framed as a potential motion.
Thank you. So we have a motion. Do we have a second on this item? I'll second the item. So we have a motion and a second. Is there a discussion on this item? Supervisor Simidian and then Supervisor Ellenberg and then Supervisor Simidian. I'm going in the order. Thanks. And go ahead, Susan.
I need some clarity first on the motion. What specifically will be brought back?
Supervisor Cortese?
The appropriation as described in the supplemental for the paid holiday. As I read the supplemental, there were in essence two options were laid out. One would be an observance of some sort called Juneteenth Day that is not a paid holiday, and the other one is a paid holiday, which requires or would require the appropriation described in the supplemental.
And are we making a distinction? Are we deciding one or the other, the observance or the paid holiday right now?
Well, the way I'm understanding this, I don't have any, I made my decision on what I want to see. But as far as the board goes, which is, as I understand your question, if we want the budget to show up on the 21st with this appropriation in it, subject to a later vote, meaning the appropriation we would close the budget process and then have that appropriation there. And essentially, I've been reluctant to use that word reserve because I didn't hear Dr. Smith or James use it, but it's a de facto reserve, it seems, because of the fact that we would have to adopt a subsequent resolution at a later board meeting that would be presented to us by legal counsel as part of our board agenda to make the decision to actually adopt the resolution or not, and then it would be subject to meet and confer. So my fear is if we don't have the appropriation in the budget and we later decide in early September that we want to go ahead and finalize the process of June 19th or Juneteenth as a paid holiday, we have we would be out of whack with the budget, for lack of a better way to put it.
I understand. Thank you. So let me share this feedback then. I think that celebrating this day is very important. I appreciated that there was tremendous community outreach and advocacy for it, particularly from the African American community. I don't know that there was an understanding in the community that there was potentially a $12 or $13 million price tag attached to that, none of which would actually be spent in the African American community or any other community. And I wonder if with that knowledge, there would be a preference from the community to spend some, a portion, any, all of those funds in ways that would directly impact and serve the community. So I would not be in a position to support an allocation right now without having that further conversation as to the best use. And I also think that as we are going to have a painful conversation today about cuts to so many of our, potential cuts to so many of our CBOs and critical partners, to hear us holding aside $12 or $13 million potentially for an observance in this time where the direct need is so high. And now, unfortunately, we get to add evacuations and fire to the experience that is 2020. So I'm very much in favor of the observance. I am not prepared and not ready to support a financial allocation that is not going to directly impact community today.
I'm going to go to Supervisor Simitian and then Dr. Smith.
Thank you. I've got a couple of comments and questions and clarifications. So the first is for Dr. Smith, and I know you were rounding off some numbers, Dr. Smith. My interpretation of the documents we have and your comments is that the cost of a day's payroll is basically $10.6 million with or without the delivery of service, and that the additional incremental cost of coverage if we are closed for a holiday is 2.3, and that those two numbers adding together are where you get 12.9 million. Is that assumption a correct one on my part, please?
Yes, you're much more clear than I was.
Well, I had the benefit of having you explain it 3 times, but my follow-up question is, and thank you, seriously, but my follow-up question is, does the 10.6 include benefits as well, which typically are an additional 40% or so of the underlying payroll? Is that included or not?
Yes, to the extent that we can predict it. Some of this is unpredictable in the sense that, people take sick time, we have to backfill, there's different amounts of overtime, but this is the ballpark.
Great.
Could I, when you get done, I want to add one more thing, but go ahead.
Thank you, I appreciate that. And Supervisor Cortese referenced 2 possibilities. One is an additional paid holiday, one is an observance. But I want to make sure, Madam Chair and colleagues, that the third option of a replacement or substitute holiday stays in the conversational mix because it would allow Juneteenth to be a paid holiday without either additional cost or the withholding of services to the tune of 10.6 million. Alternatively, yet a 4th option, sorry to make this more complicated, but I'm trying to give our board flexibility to get to a result that we can all support. A 4th option would be to say that we find a way to make a day optional. In other words, that people could choose between coming to work on this day or that day. They get a day off, and if they want to take it on this holiday, fine. If they want to take it on that holiday, fine. But again, it would not involve an additional day. So those are 2 other options that I would like to make sure, if this item is going to be continued, that stay in the mix. And Dr. Smith, that's why I was specifically asking for greater clarity about the ability to replace holidays, because it is clear, beyond dispute, that the state of California is not taking Columbus Day as an example. So I find it hard to believe then, with that clear information, that we wouldn't have some flexibility as to that day in addition to perhaps some others. So if we could get clarity on that before we are asked to make a decision, I think that would be important. And again, I find myself largely in agreement with Supervisor Ellenberg's comments, which is I absolutely positively think we need to find a way to recognize the day. As I said at the last meeting when we discussed this, I think that recognition needs to be meaningful. I'm anxious that it not become just another day that people enjoy off, but don't wrap their arms around the importance of the day and its meaning. And I appreciated the fact that the memo identified some ways we do that. But then additionally, as Supervisor Ellenberg indicated, I think essentially loss of services to the community by virtue of an additional paid holiday is not a way to necessarily a way. I'll speak for myself only. It's not necessarily a way to show the importance of the day. I'm more interested in finding tangible ways to improve circumstances, and I'll let it go at that for now. But I do want to make sure that whenever this comes back, it comes back with all options on the table.
I wanted to try to offer the board some other options in terms of process. It's not absolutely necessary to have the adopted budget reflect this on Friday. We could bring this back any other day that the board is meeting because it's of an amount that we could certainly modify the budget at that time. So if the board would like more time to think of it or more options, we could bring it back the first meeting in September, or the second meeting in September, in October, or anytime the board is ready to talk about it. The other option is the board could direct us, if you wish, to begin discussions with the labor unions first and report back to the board as part of negotiations in closed session, those results. So there's a lot of options. You don't have to feel like you need to make a decision right now if you don't want to.
Madam Chair, on that point, I think, Dr. Smith, that the budget action, if and when there is one, is really just the $2.3 million additional increment, right? Because the other 12.6 is already built, the other 10.6 is already built into the budget.
Right. That's why it was written, the first one was written that way, but I wanted to make sure that the board understood the difference between incremental and total. So that's why I'm saying you pretty much can do it any meeting you want to do it. And since the proposal would not be effective until June of 2021, there's plenty of time to decide. But if you want to do it on Friday, you should tell us to incorporate it today.
Thank you. There's a motion and a second on the floor. I'm going to go to Supervisor Wasserman.
Thank you, Madam President. I too.
And thanks for using your blue hand.
Thank you. I didn't want to color this in, so I too think it's an important date, holiday, event, occurrence to be memorialized and remembered. I saw the $12.9 million. I thought about how we spent an hour and a half yesterday arguing over $800,000. And I look at this, if you want to call it 2.3 or 12.9, and I go, okay, this is not a one time. We're talking about doing this permanently, so it's an annual event. And I'm thinking, we need to know as well, where is the money coming from? What additional cuts need to be taken where in order to fund this? I very much like what Supervisor Simidian put out there. He gave 4 options. I'm more in the 3, but the substitute holiday is certainly a preference to me right now, because that gives recognition to the Juneteenth event and fits within our current finances. We had a lot of angst and consternation yesterday discussing the the deleting of vacant funded positions. In November, we're going to be talking about filled funded positions. We're going to be talking about real people. And we need to figure out how to make this Juneteenth happen in a way in which it should happen, which is the appropriate thing to do, and we can afford to finance it and do it. And I think the point that was made earlier, it might have been by Supervisor Ellenberg, if it was somebody else, forgive me, that the public didn't exactly know what was involved with declaring a paid holiday. So I think there's more information that needs to come forward. I think Supervisor Simidian listed 4 different options. I'm interested in administration bringing back answers and ways to get to each of those 4. I'm also interested in finding out their recommendations on how we pay for it this year and going forward. And of course, depending on which option is chosen by a majority of the board, that'll be a different dollar amount that needs to be considered. Thank you.
So thank you for that. And I just want to make a quick observation, and that our county holidays are New Year's Day, Martin Luther King Jr. Day, President's Day, Cesar Chavez Day, Memorial Day, Independence Day, Labor Day, Indigenous Peoples Day, Veterans Day, Thanksgiving, Day after Thanksgiving, and Christmas. And I wanted to list those because I was thinking about what the swap out there would be and anxious to know what that is. So we have a motion and we have a second. And just to be clear, the motion would be to set aside the $2.3 million, to allocate that $2.3 million so it's not spent anywhere else, so this holiday can be considered at a later time. Is that accurate, Dave? And I'm asking
Yes.
that based on the feedback I just got from Dr. Smith.
That's correct.
Okay. So we have a motion and a second to set us to.
Point of order, Madam Chair.
Yes, sir.
Forgive the interruption. I thought we had heard from our county council that we could appropriately agendize that action for Friday, but not take it today. Perhaps I misunderstood.
No, he was saying that we could take the action, and this action today would be for direction for Friday. So this would be forwarding it to Friday. What I was trying to be clear about, apparently not so clear, was that we were talking about the 2.3, not the 12.9.
So is the motion then is not to take the action today, but to agendize it for consideration and possible action on Friday?
Supervisor Cortese?
No, the action is to refer to the final budget adoption, the appropriation of $2.3 million for a Juneteenth holiday, period. Not any of the other options that you suggested. That's the only motion I'm making.
But the action would take it to Friday for a final vote.
Right. Obviously, we have to vote on the overall budget again Friday. Today, just like all these other days, is a process of saying, what do we want to refer to that final budget process so that Greg and Jeff and the team can come back with a budget that's balanced based on what we want. And I'm asking that we include the appropriation for this Friday, on the 21st for prospective adoption.
Thank you.
And the reason I asked for the clarification, Madam President, is I believe you said to take action on it today. Supervisor Cortese said to refer to Friday. That's an important distinction.
It's clear. Yeah. I'm sorry. What I was trying to convey was that we would be acting now, voting, yay or nay, to move this to Friday. Sorry for the confusion in language.
And I'm happy to vote to refer the action to Friday. And after that motion is acted on, I will also offer a motion to refer to Friday for simultaneous consideration the other 3 options so that the board has the full complement of possibilities before it if we're going to have this conversation on Friday. Okay?
Thank you. So we have a motion and a second. I'm going to ask for a roll call vote on Supervisor Cortese's motion.
Supervisor Ellenberg?
I still need further clarity. Yeah,
I-
just a moment. If a yes vote currently holds the $2.3 million in the budget, I'm going to be a no on that because I'm not willing right now to set aside that money and not commit it to anything else. I would very much like, as Dr. Smith suggested, to be able to come back after the budget, after we've made those decisions, revisit all 4 options again, including allocating the money at that time. And he indicated that we could allocate that money outside of the budget process. So if I just analyzed or described all of that correctly, then my vote is no. If I said anything in there that was not accurate, please let me know and I may
The action
to
that we're
change the vote.
taking, the action we're taking now
Mm-hmm.
conveys this discussion
Mm-hmm.
with the way that what Supervisor Cortese is asking for is that we set aside the 2.3, but we would not take final action on that until Friday. This conveys that discussion to the Friday budget process. And James would like to weigh in because we
Nonetheless, it does say that we've got 2.3 million that we won't allocate to something else.
if we take that action on Friday.
Oh, not today. Okay.
Not today.
James?
Let me try to provide a little clarification.
Mm-hmm.
So first, let me separate 2 things. The only thing that the board can consider in the series of budget hearings, given the agenda for today or for Friday, is the set aside of the funding. So the actual establishment of the holiday, whether it's a move of a holiday or a new holiday or how it's celebrated or recognized, that's a subsequent action that would have to be agendized at a separate Board of Supervisors meeting, presumably by way of a resolution. So the only thing that is currently in front of the board is to determine whether at this time, as part of the adopted budget, to have a set aside of my understanding is $2.3 million. The actual approval of that set aside, just like the approval of all of the other departmental budgets and all of the other associated actions, would occur Friday because the adoption of the budget is scheduled for Friday. So all of the items that the board acted on Monday, yesterday, and today, the actual action is to refer the item for final consideration and approval on Friday. So to give an example that's more concrete, yesterday the board said that it was not wanting to forward to Friday the cuts, for instance, that were proposed in the Behavioral Health Services Department, and the cuts that were referred to earlier today related to the community clinics, for example. And so administration on Friday will present a revised budget that reflects that direction from the board, and we'll have to balance that budget, right? Because the budget started the week balanced, and we'll have to rebalance in order for it to continue to add up. So presumably, and I don't want to speak for administration, but presumably if the board just now referred to Friday and said, we want to refer for approval a $2.3 million set aside to be able to establish this holiday, I would imagine what administration would bring on Friday would be the creation of a reserve for the establishment of the holiday, and that reserve would be funded to the tune of the 2.3 ongoing, and there would be a 2.3 reduction in something else in order to offset that, because it has to balance out. So there's no actual appropriation being adopted today on any of the items before the board today. Appropriations would be approved on Friday. So I don't know if that provides any clarity, or if maybe I just made things more confusing.
No, I think that was helpful. I just think we're just getting started today. So folks, what I want to do is, I forgot to take public comment on this item. I'm going to hear from the rest of the board. I do want to just say there were 2 additional items that I was trying to raise under this section. I didn't realize that, I didn't mean to cause such a storm. I just didn't understand the way this information came to us. So in any case, we have a motion and a second on the floor. I'm going to go to Supervisor Wasserman.
Thank you. If I have a number of questions, and the fact that it's not being determined and settled today, I'll be supporting that motion to put it off till Friday, but I also need Supervisor Simitian's motion to come after this, because for me, this is just a placeholder. I do not know where the money is coming from. I also have some issues with the fact that we're calling it 2.3 million when yes, we have 10.6 already allocated for the day. 2.3 million would be additional. We're losing a full days of work by 20,000 employees. And the last part is, I believe Supervisor Chavez, President Chavez, in your list, you mentioned Indigenous Peoples Day. And I believe when Supervisor Simitian spoke, he was talking about Columbus Day. And I think, if I'm correct, you're both talking about the same day, but it will be interesting to see when we look at switching a holiday, how that discussion goes as well.
Right, and Supervisor Wasserman, for clarity, I'm going to go to so thank you, Supervisor Wasserman. I see your hand, Supervisor Simitian. I'm going to go to Supervisor Cortese and then to you. And I'm going based on how people's hands were raised. I just want to, Supervisor Wasserman, the order, I mean, Supervisor Wasserman, the list I was reading was off of our county holiday schedule. I just went to our website to read those. So in terms of what day it does or doesn't replace, I'm agnostic on that. I'm just reading what was on our list there. So Supervisor Wasserman, did you get all your questions answered?
Yes.
Okay, Supervisor Cortese.
Right, so again, what I'm trying to do is specifically refer the $2.3 million appropriation as a recommendation from us to the 21st for the Juneteenth holiday, period, full stop. It's important for me at some point to have a vote on whether or not we're willing to appropriate a Juneteenth holiday. I want to make that clear. There's no reason, to dance around that issue. I don't think it's right to go back to the proponents of the Juneteenth holiday, largely the African American community, and say, we're only going to look at this in the context of a possible swap. We're only willing to take the vote in the context of some other option, nor is it of any interest of mine to go tell Indigenous peoples in this community, or whoever it is that's still celebrating Columbus Day, or whoever it is that's celebrating President's Day, which I would submit is a significant number of folks in our community, and say, sorry, not to mention our workforce, this was the only way we could take a vote on whether to appropriate this or not. So maybe, the words were used somewhere along the line about, bifurcating, and we do that from time to time. Here, I would suggest if this, motion fails and people feel like this can be done at any later time, then somebody can, continue that conversation at a later time by whatever mechanism it takes to put it on the agenda. But today is the day to say, I brought a referral forward. It called for the creation of a Juneteenth holiday. That was my recommendation. Other people said they might want to look at other options. I'm just being consistent today and saying, I want to ask that we refer the appropriation of $2.3 million into the final budget wrap-up on the 21st. Not a lot of other things. And it seems to me there's plenty of opportunity either off the dais right after we take this vote, or by a paper memo, or next week or next month. If somebody wants to say, offer that we swap, eliminate, change, or restructure our overall holidays, to me, that's a separate referral. I'm just telling you the way I look at it. It's a separate referral. And I think I have the right to say, what I was trying to do with my own referral. If there were misunderstandings about that, or if there was any expectation that when we got to today that I wouldn't suggest that the money be appropriated if it's a reasonable sum, and I think it is. $2.3 million is a reasonable sum to go back to the community that's been waiting over 170 years for this holiday to be recognized to do it. That's just my opinion. That's all. But I just would like to get through the vote on this. The only thing I would say is I did hear a lot of people who spoke last time. Frankly, I thought they were reacting to me saying the referral doesn't have a budget implication, which I did. There were no fiscal implications, and that we would take that up later in the budget process. I heard many of those speakers say, despite the budget implications, this needs to happen. And so I'm not trying to contradict any of my colleagues or anything like that. I just want to say what I heard. I don't think we're going to hear a lot of sentiment from the community of advocates that comes back and says, oh, gee, now that we heard this is $2.3 million in the budget, we don't want it anymore, or we don't think it's appropriate anymore. Maybe there's another community of non-advocates that will say that. Certainly, that should be heard, and it sounds like there's an opportunity to hear more on the 21st, no matter how this motion goes. But again, to bring this, I mean, to Mr. Williams, I have to say what the $2.3 million is for when I make a motion today. I can't say it's for some holiday. I can't say it's for some concept to have a holiday. You know, I have to say what it's for. At least I have to define a motion or frame a motion in such a way that people know what I'm asking them to vote on, whether they vote yes or no, aye or nay. And I'm asking people to vote to move direction to include $2.3 million in a reserve, as you described, Mr. Williams, for a Juneteenth holiday to come back to us on the 24th, on the 21st. That's, again, period, what the motion is.
So I'm going to go to Supervisor Simitian, and then I can see your blue hand. I'll go to you after Supervisor Ellenberg, and I really appreciate you using those when you can. Thank you.
Thank you. And I would be using that blue hand, but I'm struggling with my technology. That blue hand has disappeared from my screen. I apologize, Supervisor Chavez. Look, I think we are, bluntly, I think we are all stretching to try and accommodate not only this conversation, but to get to a good result, perhaps most importantly. The fact of the matter is this item is not agendized today. Notwithstanding the fact that it's not agendized today, I've heard all of them indicate to take the matter up.
You went out for a minute.
Thank you. What I said, Madam Chair, is I think all of us are struggling to accommodate the desire to take this matter up in a timely fashion. The fact of the matter is the item is not agendized today. Notwithstanding that fact, the County Council has given us a path to make sure we can discuss it just 2 days from now. And all we're trying to do is make sure that for a non-agendized item, soon to be heard on Friday, if we move forward with some kind of action today, that we keep our options open. I understand very clearly now that Supervisor Cortese's motion is in fact to set aside the 2.3 million. But there is a very real distinction between making that decision today and referring it to Friday for discussion at that time. The initial memo we had from Supervisor Cortese was a brief one, and it used both the term observance and holiday, which is why, as you may recall, at that meeting, I said I thought it was important to understand exactly what the proposal was. I understand now what the proposal is. I've suggested that there may be some other options worthy of consideration. I just want to make sure they get considered. So I am now prepared to move an amendment to the motion on the floor And my amendment is that the other three options that I discussed be part of the discussion on Friday, and that our action today not be to, quote, set aside 2.3 million, but to refer this item for discussion and possible action to our Friday agenda. I'm hoping I can get a second.
Second.
And Supervisor Wasserman has given you a second.
Great. Now, if Supervisor Cortez would like to simply accept that as a friendly amendment, great. And if not, then we can vote it up or down, but that would allow us to take the path that he wants to take. If there is a will of the board to do that, it would also allow us to look at other options.
Yeah, I'm not willing to accept it as a friendly amendment. I don't want to, I feel like I've elaborated enough as to what my values are on this issue that I'm trying to contain in the motion that I made. And I just don't have anything more to add to the motion that I made. I respect what you're going through the parliamentary process to try to, modify the motion or make your own motion. That's fine. I'm not upset about that. But by the same token, I support my motion the way it stands right now. I don't know how to get around that.
Thank you,
No,
Supervisor Cortese. Supervisor Simidian, do you have more comments?
No, thank you. I think I understand entirely, and I just think the question is whether if you're Supervisor Cortese, he's been, I think, very forthright about the fact that he's already reached a conclusion on this, which I understand and respect. That being said, for those of us who would like to find a way to both honor the day and also be mindful of the need to devote these funds to public services, I think there may be a desire to consider other options, and we'll find out here in a minute. Thank you.
Supervisor Ellenberg.
Thank you. What I want to share and what I will intend to do between now and Friday is to reach out to those advocates and get an understanding and some feedback, because those are the opinions that are important to me on this, as to whether, if we are setting aside $2.3 million, whether there would be a preference to use that as vacation pay for a county holiday, or invest that $2.3 million directly in the community. And again, that would involve, perhaps a grant process or something else, but using that money to provide services that are urgently needed in the community. So with that option being open, I would be supportive right now of reserving that money, but again, in accordance with Supervisor Simidian's memo, with all options on the table, including that reserve being used for needed community services in impacted and advocate communities.
Thank you. I just wanted to say to my colleagues, we're going to go to public comment. We have a motion and a second on the floor. I did want to let folks know that there were two other issues that I wanted to raise. I think I'll find another part of the agenda to do that, to not cause confusion, but they were relative to a pay equity strategy plan that I didn't see the funding for in the budget, and the diagnostic center, and both items I had been alerted earlier were going to be in the budget. So I'm more sunshining that, Dr. Smith, to give you an opportunity to maybe to address that with the appropriate staff, and I will find the right departments to tuck those under. So with that, I'm going to go to the public on this item, and then we'll come back to the board for final action.
Our next speaker is Ren Bradley. I am unmuting you. Please accept the unmute. You will have 1 minute to speak. Let's reset the time, please.
Hello.
The timer will start when you begin speaking.
Okay. Hello, this is Ren Bradley. I'm actually wearing two hats today. One is a county employee and one is from the union. I just want to remind folks that we fought very, very hard long ago to have Cesar Chavez as a holiday. And I have to tell you from my heart, I was very offended to see that in whatever happens, that there is even the thought of swapping a holiday of Cesar Chavez, who's so important to our entire state of California, the entire country, and in this pandemic when farm workers are being devastated by the disease. I just want to make it very clear for me as a human being on this planet that there is just no way that Cesar Chavez's holiday should ever be considered giving that holiday up. I know you all have a very hard task ahead of you, and I give you all my blessings and hope.
Our next speaker is Kiana Munoz. I am unmuting you. Please accept the unmute. You will have 1 minute to speak. The timer will start when you begin speaking.
Hello, my name is Kiana Munoz, and I am a community worker for the African American Community Service Agency, and I live in District 5. During such a sensitive time our nation faces with such things as racial equality and social justice, the importance is plain to see when it comes to making Juneteenth a paid countywide holiday. I understand that Black Lives Matter movement has taken a large decline when it comes to the media coverage, but the issue is still the same and as important as when we've seen Ahmaud Arbery get shot down while running. I thank the board for being such a receptive for this cause and for this idea. And I hope that the importance of and significance of Juneteenth is reviewed as well. Thank you.
Our next speaker is Sabrina Monet La Montaña. I am unmuting you. Please accept the unmute. You will have 1 minute to speak. The timer will start when you begin speaking.
Hi, my name is Sabrina Monet La Montaña, and I live in San Jose, District 6. I'm the office manager at the African American Community Service Agency. And I want to thank the board and community for being so receptive to this idea and showing support at the last Board of Supervisors meeting. We should exemplify the equity this holiday is meant to represent by giving this holiday the same or more attention, support, and investment as any other in this county. The end of slavery is no small event and deserves significant celebration and recognition. We should not consider just swapping it for another holiday or just observing the holiday. I also want to acknowledge that while slavery has ended, we still see economic inequality, oppression, and injustice in our nation. Holidays like Juneteenth bring us one step closer to ending that. Thank you.
Our next speaker is Maisha Taylor. I am unmuting you. Please accept the unmute. You will have 1 minute to speak. The timer will start when you begin speaking.
Thank you so much. My name is Maisha Taylor, and I'm a program specialist coordinator at the African American Community Service Agency that sits on 6th Street in Julian. Having an ear for the community on a daily basis, securing the $2.3 million aside today is, and as a paid holiday, is important because it's showing the investment that the county is saying, not only by an observance, but also by implementation. It's important that the funds back up what we are saying about the holiday being important and about the understanding that the board has about the significance to community members. I also want to mention our children in this county and how we need to have a staple, something that's backed by funding to say that we believe in what we say and we believe in the emancipation and those who suffer from it.
Our next speaker is unincorporated resident D3. I am unmuting you. Please accept the unmute. You will have 1 minute to speak. The timer will start when you begin speaking.
Hi, I'm sorry. This is a public comment not on the item, but I live in Dave Cortese's district in the East Foothills, and at 2 p.m. CAL FIRE issued an evacuation order for all areas east of Toyon Avenue. I don't know if this information is accurate. I called the sheriff's office and they were unaware of the order. When I called Dave Cortese's office, they shared information on an earlier public order. My neighbors are starting to congregate in the streets and on next door. We're getting kind of frantic and we need to know which information we need to follow. Thank you.
Our next speaker is Mila Romero. I am unmuting you. Please accept the unmute. You will have 1 minute to speak. The timer will start when you begin speaking.
Hello, my name is Mila Romero, and I think it's very important that we keep Juneteenth holiday. But it's also very important to allocate funds and the cause and the purpose, because suppression and racial injustices are occurring in a lot of sectors. The community needs help in housing. They need help in restorative justice. Is there any way that we could also incorporate acknowledging and having the holiday in addition to placing funds in public sector and honoring and keeping it going forward, that this is very important for the human rights and civil, for the people.
Our next speaker is AACSA. I am unmuting you. Please accept the unmute. You will have 1 minute to speak. The timer will start when you begin speaking.
Hello, my name is Kathy Blake, and I'm the program manager at the African American Community Service Agency. I live in District 4, and I want to express my support of item 16 to make Juneteenth a countywide paid holiday and make it the 13th paid holiday for Santa Clara County. A paid holiday rather than just an observance of Juneteenth is a small ask for 400 years of unpaid labor endured by Africans brought here to build this country and make it the great nation that it is and the leaders of the free world. Passing of this initiative tells the world that Santa Clara County wants to set the wheels in motion towards equity. It is a gesture to show all people that we honor the contributions of Africans to our society, and we all have reason to celebrate and commemorate this Juneteenth holiday. Please find the budget in this county to make the paid holiday happen. Thank you very much, and we appreciate you bringing it to the board's attention.
Our next speaker is Ariana Luna. I am unmuting you. Please accept the unmute. You will have 1 minute to speak. The timer will start when you begin speaking. Ariana, are you there? Okay, we'll move on to the next speaker. Our next speaker is Connie Chu. I am unmuting you. Please accept the unmute. You will have 1 minute to speak. The timer will start when you begin speaking.
Hi, yes, Connie Chu, county worker and SEIU member. Also with reference to my comments on August 11th, it is important in this time of history to acknowledge Juneteenth in a more meaningful way. It is long overdue. A Juneteenth holiday will show that you care and allow people to participate freely in its celebrations of their choice each year. I wish my schools taught me more about this day in my younger years. This will highlight to future generations the significance of the end of slavery. Thank you.
Our next speaker is Melanie Martinez. I am unmuting you. Please accept the unmute. You will have 1 minute to speak. The timer will start when you begin speaking. Melanie, are you there?
Melanie, you need to unmute.
She's not unmuting. We'll come back to her.
Thank you.
Our next speaker is Sasha Richardson. I am unmuting you. Please accept the unmute. You will have 1 minute to speak. The timer will start when you begin speaking.
Hi, everyone. My name is Sasha Richardson, and I'm a community worker at the African American Community Service Agency. Being an African American woman and being an African American woman working in an African American based organization, I can strongly say that the support of making this a paid holiday is more impactful than you guys can imagine. These are impacting lives that the African American Community Service Agency deals with every day, that our history, that our people have dealt with since the beginning of time, and that only truly our people can fully understand how it will impact us, since one's being impacted every day by this. So I urge for you guys to listen to the voices to help us make this a paid holiday, and to also funnel in funds for these areas that are supporting it. Funnel in funds to these agencies that are educating the community on what really matters about our history. And please never forget that voices need to be heard, and the voices of the Black people are enabled to speak for the Black community. Thank you.
Our next speaker is Helen Casa. I am unmuting you. Please accept the unmute. You will have 1 minute to speak. The timer will start when you begin speaking.
Hi, my name is Helen Casa. I am a program coordinator with the African American Community Service Agency, and I just want to echo a lot of what's been said. I think that Juneteenth should be a paid holiday because, in other words, it's putting your money where your mouth is in terms of the importance and significance of the day. I do understand the importance of utilizing funds to invest the community, but I do have strong faith that we can still find the funds to do both. but having it as a paid holiday does add a certain level of ethos to the importance of the day and will require people to at least recognize it, whereas observations are easy to ignore. That's all. Thank you.
Our next speaker is Scott Largent. I am unmuting you. Please accept the unmute. Scott seems to have disappeared. Our next speaker is Derek. I am unmuting you. Please accept the unmute. You will have 1 minute to speak. The timer will start when you begin speaking.
Good afternoon. My name is Derek Jackson. I am a member of the African American Community Service Agency, but I'm also a taxpayer, and I've also been in education for the last 26 years. I'm totally in support of this initiative of Juneteenth, not only because of the history of Juneteenth, but because of what it would represent for our nation, especially for our young children who will at one point in their life lead this country. What our children learn growing up will impact their decisions when they become adults. This is just not a Black matter, but an American matter. I would love for this to be an opportunity for our kids to have discussions in the schoolhouse about the history, where we come from, and where we can go together as a nation. Thank you.
Our next speaker is Ariana Luna. I am unmuting you. Please accept the unmute. You will have 1 minute to speak. The timer will start when you begin speaking. Ariana, are you there? Ariana is unmuted but not speaking. Okay, we may have lost them. Our next speaker is Scott Largent. I am unmuting you. Please accept the unmute. You will have 1 minute to speak. The timer will start when you begin speaking.
Thank you. Good afternoon, everybody. Scott Largent. I fully support the Juneteenth holiday and setting that up in our county. My only problem, well, it's not really a problem, the money that's associated with this. I would like to see more money going towards the public defender's office, providing a better legal defense for the African American community. There's a lot of other things rather than having a holiday. I just don't. I see a lot of talk in one direction, and I don't see action in others. I'm not sure if a lot of you chimed in last night to the San Jose City Council meeting. They're trying to basically bury everything that happened during the civil unrest in downtown San Jose, where the American public was used as target practice. This is going to create more protesting, more civil disobedience. And I'm kind of looking at you supervisors on when you're going to really get out there and start making public statements and start saying what happened was wrong. Nobody wants to do that in our county.
Our next speaker is Milan Ballantyne. I am unmuting you. Please accept the unmute. You will have 1 minute to speak. The timer will start when you begin speaking.
Thank you, supervisors, for bringing this forward for the Santa Clara County community. On behalf of the 12 million slaves, individuals that were turned into slaves, coming to a country that they didn't know anything about, and turning things into things that are better now for the American society. I think that having Juneteenth as a holiday is a drop in the bucket to what the community has done here. But what it will do as a holiday is educate people when they are off. Well, what is Juneteenth? Why does Juneteenth exist? Which we've already started the discussions around what does the holiday actually mean. And I think that when we talk about the other holidays that exist, there were arguments and fights about even having those as holidays. This is our fight, and the fight that the board has is just to put forward the votes, to push it forward so that we can educate the masses about Juneteenth, and the County of Santa Clara can be one of many that have taken a stand and put forward their votes to a greater cause.
That concludes the speakers on this item, Madam President. You're muted.
Thank you. Thank you very much. And I see that Dr. Smith, you have your hand up, but I don't think it's on this item. Is that accurate?
I was going to give the board an update on what's going on with the fire, if you want.
Yes, I'm going to take this vote and then I'll come to you.
Okay.
So the motion on the floor was put forward by Supervisor Simidian and seconded by Supervisor Wasserman. Is there any more discussion on the item? Supervisor Simidian.
You're muted.
Yes, sir.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just to clarify, it's actually an amendment on another motion on the floor. So if there are 3 votes to approve the proposed amendment, then the main motion as amended would still be on the floor, I believe.
That's what I seconded.
So is it acting like a substitute motion?
No, it was an amendment to the motion on the floor, which was offered by Supervisor Cortese, and the amendment, which was seconded by Supervisor Wasserman, was to amend the motion so that it was a referral rather than an action today, explicitly, to essentially continue the item rather than take action today as a set aside, and to add the other 3 options for consideration and possible action on Friday. Supervisor Wasserman, I believe that is consistent with the earlier motion and your second. Yes, sir?
Yes. Through the
All
chair.
And that,
Thank you. So we have a motion and we have a second. Any more discussion on the motion? Let's get a roll call vote.
Supervisor Ellenberg,
Yes.
Supervisor Simidian,
yes.
Supervisor Cortese,
No.
Vice President Wasserman,
Yes.
President Chavez.
No. Thank you. That passes on a 3-2 vote. Supervisor Wasserman, you're not using your little blue hand. Go ahead.
I'm going right there to it right now. Just one thing, when Ren Bradley spoke and she mentioned Cesar Chavez Day, I don't think anyone mentioned considering anything to do with Cesar Chavez Day. That was never brought up. And for the person that called in about current information, I was just given the...
Dr. Smith is going to give us a whole update on that. He's got Gary with him.
And for the person who called, it's facebook.com/SCC Fire Department.
Thank you.
And a point of order, Madam Chair, forgive me, I believe the main motion is still on the floor as amended. That was the point I was trying to make before. I
I
apologize.
didn't understand that. As
Supervisor Simidian is correct. You have to vote on the amended motion now. The motion as amended.
Okay. So then, so the motion as amended is what?
The motion as amended is to refer to Friday the possibility of a $2.3 million set aside, along with the other 3 options that were mentioned, for consideration and possible action this Friday. I believe that's consistent with Mr. Wasserman's second, and Mr. Williams, I believe that's the status of the motion at this moment. Yes?
But what's the distinction between that motion and the motion you just made?
Good question.
The motion I made a moment ago, Madam Chair, was an amendment to an existing motion that was on the floor. Supervisor Cortese had placed a motion on the floor. It had received a second. I asked if he would be prepared to accept that as a friendly amendment. He declined, and therefore there was a motion on the floor by me to amend his motion. So his motion as amended, I believe, is now on the floor, and before we can move on, we need to just take one more vote to approve the amended motion.
Thank you. Thank you for clearing that up. So we're going to take a... So I just want you to know, James sent me a note saying, Joe's right, Robert's rules. Okay, got it. We have a motion. So that motion then is, it's still your motion. We're just doing it twice.
I believe technically it is Mr. Cortese's motion as amended.
Not really. What I was actually referring to was content. So the content of the motion is the same, irrespective of the maker and the seconder and the outcome of, so I got that. So I'm going to ask for a roll call vote.
Supervisor Ellenberg,
Yes.
Supervisor Simidian,
Yes.
Supervisor Cortese,
No.
Vice President Wasserman,
Yes.
President Chavez.
No.
And Supervisor Chavez, through the chair, one more request for information, if I may. I used the reference to Columbus Day because in discussing this issue with county staff, I was told that it is officially still Columbus Day, even though it shows up in many, but apparently not all locations on various county websites as Indigenous Peoples Day. But I think we all know which day we're talking about. And so if when we come back to this item on Friday, staff could tell us the status of that particular holiday and whether it is officially one thing or the other, or has fallen into custom and practice of being referred to by both names, I do think that would be helpful in finally getting to a good outcome. Last thing I'll say is thank you to all of the speakers. Their comments were heartfelt and insightful, and I wanted them to know they were heard.
Okay, we're going to go to Dr. Smith for an important safety announcement.
Thank you, Madam President. I would like to let the board and the public know that at 2 o'clock today, CAL FIRE made a press release which expressed an evacuation order and a separate warning. So I'll read the order to you. It's very short. It's an evacuation order for the areas bordered by the east part of Ed Levine County Park and Felter Road and Sierra Road and Toyon Avenue and Mount Hamilton, from that border to 3 Springs Road, and north of Mount Hamilton also to 3 Springs Road, south of Santa Clara Valley line to the western border of the fire perimeter. And then there is a separate evacuation warning in Santa Clara County, east of San Jose city limits, south to Mount Hamilton Road, north of Metcalf and San Felipe Road, east to the county line, east of San Antonio Valley Road to Del Puerto Canyon Road to the county line. And I'd also like to let the board know and the public know we're putting out a press release right now ourselves from the EOC, and also an SCC alert that we have just opened the Milpitas Library as a evacuation site, which will be staffed and supplied, well, is staffed and supplied now and available for usage from anybody who's evacuating. That's all I have to say.
Thank you. Dr. Smith, Supervisor Cortese, I'm going to go to Supervisor Cortese, and then I was curious if we had Gary or, well, what I was wanting to know is what the reference that Supervisor Wasserman gave was helpful, but I'm just wondering if there's a reference we want to send people to, if it's best to, you know, to know what's happening in your area. But I'll go to Supervisor Cortese next.
Yeah, Supervisor Chavez, just to put everybody on sort of real life alert and notice here. Much of that area that was just described is in District 3, if not all of it. I'm not entirely sure. There are thousands of homes in between those coordinates that were just listed. The entire community of Evergreen, for example, from basically the entire community of Evergreen, what the city calls District 8, would be north of Metcalf. And the area where I'm at currently, sheltering in place on the Zoom call, would not only be in it, but the unincorporated areas, in theory, when you say east of Toyon, would be again thousands and thousands of homes. So just to put the EOC on notice, sending out an SCC alert that says everyone go, or you can go to shelter in the Milpitas Community Center, is not going to work if everyone actually starts to go there. I do believe there's a lot of confusion. Ordinarily in these circumstances, we were told and have been told over the past couple of days by CAL FIRE notifications online that if and when actual evacuations were needed, that responders would move up and down the streets, getting people's attention, honking their horns, telling people to leave. None of that is going on in the areas immediately surrounding me, which are in the areas that you just described, Dr. Smith. So I just need to let you know, because I know all of you are focused on this meeting, you're focused on COVID response, you're doing other things in the EOC, and you can't probably visibly see what's going on. But in effect, there's very little to no direction going on in the neighborhoods in the community. My office and my staff has been trying as best as possible to get that information out to people. Obviously, we have limited ability. I do not control SCC Alert or any kind of a system that would communicate with every single resident in that area. I don't have enough staff to go out and honk horns and knock on all the doors. So if indeed the evacuation is for good reason, which I believe it is, the fires in the vicinity in this Mount Hamilton range have grown exponentially in a period of just a few hours. And if they're really threatening people in homes in this area, then a lot more needs to be done to let people know what's going on and to accurately let people know which neighborhoods need to start moving out, as opposed to just broad-based coordinates like south of Toyon or north of Metcalf. That's not really good enough. So I don't know if I'm so much as looking for a verbal response, but I'm hoping those comments get some kind of action going, because it's obviously it's not going to do much good to talk about it here on Zoom. And I think I'm going to have to get off here in just a few minutes when this report is done, to just do my due diligence here, in my own district.
Let me give a few little clarifying comments. Number one, the place to go on the web is actually CAL FIRE, not Santa Clara Fire, because this issue is being led by CAL FIRE, and they're the ones who put out the news release. It is a rather cryptic news release. We're trying to get clarification about what kind of support they need, if any, and what they're doing to actually notify the community. And I agree with the supervisor that there's been confusion back and forth about who's making the order, why it's been made, what is supposed to be doing. We're taking responsibility for the evacuation locations, and Milpitas's library is not the only evacuation location available to us, so we will have sufficient capacity if needed. We're also talking with the Sheriff's Department, who has patrol responsibility for that area, about notification issues. But I agree with the supervisor, this is a very important issue. We're trying to get clarification from CAL FIRE exactly what they're talking about, exactly what area they are referring to, because the short press release is not very helpful.
Yes, and if I may, through the chair, we also have the situation, the circumstances where people need to be told en masse what direction to go in if they're seeking to evacuate somewhere on their own, other than those facilities offered by either the county or CAL FIRE or public agencies, and that's the reason. I mean, ordinarily, if there was a fire in a particular geographic area, and it was sort of confined to that area, I think people generally know to go away from the fire. As you know, Dr. Smith, there's not really a direction you can go in, east, west, north, or south right now to go away from fire. And I think we all have a responsibility as a county, and I'm asking for your help with that, for the administration's help with that, to start figuring out, much like we would do, if we had another earthquake like Loma Prieta, what do we need to tell people right now in terms of where to go, and where not to go? It's pretty critical. It's going to get chaotic here shortly if we can't manage it somehow better than it's being managed right now. And I'm not blaming anybody for that. This appears to be an extraordinary, catastrophic disaster that's going on all around us right now. Nobody's at fault for that. Lightning is at fault for it, but as focused as we've been on other issues, I'm afraid we're going to have to pivot and address what's going on with fire safety and evacuations right now, along with our sister agencies, the City of San Jose, and other people who are in a position to help us. Obviously, we're not getting a lot of mutual aid right now either. Anyway, thank you. I appreciate your comments, and it sounds like you're working on it, but I'm going to at least leave temporarily, Supervisor Chavez. I'll announce myself if I come back. Obviously, okay. And if I come back during the course of this particular hearing, but it appears that I need to determine first and foremost if I need to evacuate myself right now and my neighbors. Thank you.
Thank you. What I would like to do is, I'm sorry, Supervisor Wasserman.
Thank you. Just very quickly for CAL FIRE, it's www.fire.ca.gov/incidents, INCIDENTS.
Thank you. What I'd like to do, if it's all right with my colleagues, is to take out of order County Fire and the SEPA budget, but to start with County Fire so that we can let those folks go. So this would be items 144, 145, 146, and then to go to Consumer and Environmental Protection, 138, 139, and 140. If anybody else needs to be included in that, I'm going to ask staff to let me know the answer to that while this meeting is going forward. So if I could call up County Fire, 144, 145, 146, if my colleagues are okay with that.
I would be
I'm sorry, Supervisor Wasserman had his hand up, and then I'll come to you, Supervisor Ellenberg. Supervisor Wasserman.
Thank you. I was going to make a consent. I thought this was the time you wished me to make a motion for put items on consent.
I'm starting with fire.
And yes, and 3 of those were fire, unless they had something they wanted to add in.
So we have a motion for 144, 145, and 146. Supervisor Ellenberg?
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any discussion on this item?
No, let's get them out of here.
Okay, well, I actually have one. And I want to refer, I'm going to ask my staff to send out to my colleagues the report on wildfire risk and response that the fire department put together for our discussion in April of last year. It was a response to referral that came out of, I think from myself and Dave, out of FGOC to the full board. And the board actually was, so it was December 18. This was a body of research that was done in April of 2019. What I'd like to ask my colleagues, I'm not asking you to fund it, it's very expensive, but I am going to ask that we move the report to the discussion on Friday, because one of the things that I've been concerned about as we've been focused on COVID-19 is whether or not we're really ready for wildfires. They came earlier than we were expecting them. We had a few more weeks before we thought this was going to be as bad as it is. That tells me that we actually may need to be looking at some new investment strategies. The document has come before the board twice already, so it's not a new document, but I do want to request from the maker of the motion that we at least refer the document so it's in the public realm. You all have a chance to look at it so it can be discussed on Friday. Is that okay with the maker of the motion?
Yes, ma'am. And I had a question on my hand raised for something.
Oh, go ahead.
Thank you. In my consent motion, I had 11 items. 144, 45, and 46 were 3 of those. If it's okay with the seconder, I'd say the other 8. I can number them.
I would rather just take this action. Mike, I
Okay.
really want to let people go, and I don't, thank you. So I'm going to ask for a roll. We have no speakers on this item. So this will be referred to Friday with the report that's already come to staff. I'm sorry, we have 1 speaker on this item, and then we'll go to a roll call vote.
Our next speaker is Mila Romero. I am unmuting you. Please accept the unmute. You will have 1 minute to speak. The timer will start when you begin speaking.
Dear Board of Supervisors.
Mila, are you there?
Not for today, but.
I am here. Can you hear me?
Yes,
Yes.
we can.
Okay. Dear Board of Supervisors, I would like to say a special prayer for you and all the officials that are governing our city and county at this time to please fall by your bedside and pray to the Lord, please, to give you the strength and give you the receival of the plan to govern the people and protect us from the fires and and work with you through the pandemic, that you may please be of significant help and relief to the land that is being given to you on borrowed time and borrowed land by the Lord, that you will make all of the necessary changes and decisions to propel us forward and through this pandemic. In Jesus' name I pray, amen.
Thank you.
That concludes our speakers, Madam President.
Thank you. A roll call vote, please.
Supervisor Ellenberg,
Yes.
Supervisor Simidian,
Simidian, aye.
Supervisor Cortese is absent. Vice President Wasserman,
Yes.
President Chavez.
Yes. Thank you. All right, Mike, now I'm going to go back to you. I wanted to go to SEPA, but we'll go to you because it might be inclusive. So go ahead.
Thank you. I would move at this time items 119, in-home support services, item 137, planning
Okay.
and development,
I'm sorry. Okay, got it.
138, 39, and 40, which are SEPA, 141, which is roads and airports, 142, county sanitation district, and 143, parks. That will also free up many department heads. There should be no objection to those items that I know of.
Second that.
We have a motion, a second. I'm going to ask to remove item 119, and that's IHSS, but the rest of them I'm fine with. Is there any other comments on this motion? Seeing none, are there any speakers on this motion?
We have no speakers, Madam President.
Thank you. So we'll do a roll call vote.
Supervisor Ellenberg,
Yes.
Supervisor Simidian,
Simidian, aye.
Supervisor Cortese is absent. Vice President Wasserman,
Yes.
President Chavez.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you. We'll now go back to item 119, and this is IHSS's budget. And on, I just had one question for IHSS, and that is that I don't, some time ago, we had a referral for a restructure of the case management body of work that that happens here in part because of speed. Oh, thank you. Thank you. Oh my goodness. I'm going to go back to 117 and 118. This is the Department of Child Support Services. Thanks, James. And I'm going to see if there are any public speakers for child support services. This would be the time to raise your hand. I'm going to see if there's any presentation relative to this item that either Greg or the staff would like to make.
We have nothing else to add besides the material that's in your packet.
Thank you. And is that the case from our director as well?
Yes, I have nothing to add, but I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you. Are there any questions from my colleagues? See no public speakers? Go. Oh, I'm sorry. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm mostly a comment. So, and as I've done for the past 2 days, I want to use this kind of first item to set up a theme that I want to pursue as we move through today's agenda. And it will certainly hardly be a surprise to anyone if I assert that my priorities are always viewed through the lens of what is best for kids and families. And what I want to point out now really is a warning about complacency and how we really must be cognizant of the disconnects between our county mission and our child impact statements. Child impact statements are a part of every ledge file, and I truly appreciate this. However, sometimes they seem to be pro forma rather than actually analytical or informative. And I'll give you an example from 117 before us. The child impact statement says that this action will ensure the department can continue with its mission to promote the well-being of children and self-sufficiency of families by delivering effective child support services to help meet the financial and medical needs of children. But then the background statement to that ledge file reads in part, service impacts due to these funding reductions are significant. We could potentially eliminate a significant number of staff, which would increase caseloads per worker and increase turnaround times, which would have a negative impact on customer service and collections. Caseload counts among child service officers would rise and our workload would increase, creating additional backlog. Additionally, we anticipate these reductions would have a significant negative impact on our federal performance measures and metrics. Our ability to effectively and efficiently establish court-ordered judgments for child support, enforce those orders, and collect/distribute financial support for the children and families on our caseload would be severely impacted. So in what way does administration's proposal allow the county to, quote, continue with its mission to promote the well-being of children and the self-sufficiency of families? We cannot just say things and assume that it makes them so. The proposed cuts that we're going to be looking at over the next few items are serious and exacerbate the challenges that kids and families are already facing during these difficult times. So as we move through today's agenda, I will raise very specific concerns about some of the proposed cuts in SSA. I know that any restorations will have to be offset by cuts somewhere else, but we cannot pull away from our core responsibility to serve the county's vulnerable children. I won't do it.
You're muted, Madam President. Madam President, you're muted.
Susan, I'm sorry, the last sentence you said, was that an action or you just faded out? Okay.
It was not an action. It was a gauntlet and a lead up for action items that will come.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. I'm going to go now to the public speaker.
Our next speaker is Scott Largent. I am unmuting you. Please accept the unmute. You will have 1 minute to speak. The timer will start when you begin speaking.
Thank you, everyone. Scott Largent. The Department of Child Support Services popped up onto one of my court orders. And even though I've complied with just about everything, I'm terrified to use another county agency that's just going to get their claws in on my business. I thought we stopped using Wells Fargo. I thought things were on a suspension for, I believe it was up to 3 years. I understand all these payments are processed using Wells Fargo. Friends that are paying child support keep wondering why money's disappearing. And when that department makes a mistake, and when they make a big financial mistake, like they did with my friend Lindsay, she didn't receive a dime for about 6 months. That put her in the poorhouse. She damn near lost her kid. She's back on a lot of her different therapies for her cancer that she has, but it just ripped her life apart. They did nothing to just a sit down meeting. Where's the damage control too? So.
That concludes our speakers on this item, Madam President.
Thank you very much. We have a motion. Do we have a motion on this item? May I get one?
So moved.
We have a motion. Do we have a second?
Second.
We have a second. Any discussion on the motion?
It's 117 and 18.
That's correct. We're on 117 and 118 Department of Child Support Services. We have a motion and a second. Seeing no other comments, I will ask for a roll call vote.
Supervisor Ellenberg,
Yes.
Supervisor Simidian. He may have stepped away. Supervisor Cortese is absent. Vice President Wasserman.
Aye.
President Chavez.
Yes.
And we'll go back to Supervisor Simidian. Okay, thank you.
Thank you very much. This will be moved to Friday. Thank you, Director Guerrero. We'll now go to item 119. This is to refer IHSS budget to Friday. And I'm not expecting a response today, but I did want to make sure that we have one public speaker on this item, but I did just want to ask staff if they could give us an update on the if they could just give us an update, and it doesn't need to be on Friday. This could actually come to Children's Family Seniors. I just really wanted to get an update on the on whether or not we had looked at any kind of reconfiguration of service provision so that we were continuing to get the lines of how long it takes people to get services reduced. And then that was really the main question. And I asked that not because of any cuts, but more out of concern just for the current operations. I'm sorry, that was unclear. Really what I'm looking at is whether or not we're able to keep the lines for people who have a need down so that we're able to process the applications more quickly, and then any reaffirmations of applications.
Yeah, we can provide you with that information. And also, just to be clear, I think this item actually relates to the public authority though, and not IHSS, but we can bring that to CSFC. No problem.
Okay. Oh, thank you. Thanks for that clarity. I appreciate it. All right. So that was my only comment I wanted to make. And we have no public speakers on this item. So I will go to my colleagues for action.
Motion to approve.
We have a motion from Supervisor Wasserman for 119 and referring the IHSS budget to Friday.
Second.
Second from Supervisor Ellenberg. Seeing no other comments, I'm going to request a roll call vote.
Supervisor Ellenberg.
Yes.
Supervisor Simidian.
Aye.
Supervisor Cortese is absent. Vice President Wasserman.
Yes.
President Chavez.
Yes. Thank you
you
very much. We're now moving to items 120 through 136. This is the Social Services Agency budget. I wanted to see if there were any comments from Mr. Iteria and or Mr. Mendicucci.
Nothing from the Office of Budget and Analysis. Thank you.
Thank you. And from Bob?
No, just here to answer questions that you may have.
Thank you. I'm going to see if there are any comments or questions from my colleagues. If not, what I'd like to do is go to the public. We have a few public speakers on this item. We'll take the public speakers first, then we'll come back to the board for discussion.
Our next speaker is Andrew Kane. I am unmuting you. Please accept the unmute. You will have 1 minute to speak. The timer will start when you begin speaking.
Good afternoon, supervisors. My name is Andrew Kane. I am a directing attorney at the Legal Advocates for Children and Youth program of the Law Foundation Silicon Valley. I'm speaking today on item 120, and I am asking the board to reject the proposed cuts, the terminations, and the right sizing to the community-based organization. These cuts implicate, among many priorities of this board, 3 that stand out: race equity, foster youth, and preventative services. Within the specific contracts that the Law Foundation holds, 81% of our clients who are served under those 2 contracts are children from communities of color. If we are going to be true to our commitment to addressing disproportionality in child welfare, we need to support all of the community-based organizations. Our guardianship work is a preventative tool that keeps children out of the system, and our educational rights advocacy is more critical now than ever as our students continue to struggle with the challenges of distance learning. I thank the board for their attention to this matter.
Our next speaker is Sparky Harlan. I am unmuting you. Please accept the unmute. You will have 1 minute to speak. The timer will start when you begin speaking.
Hi, this is Sparky Harlan, and I'm speaking, asking you not to support the reductions to the CBOs. I know if you looked at the federal pass-through dollars that are available, our project in 2008 was 100% federal pass-through through Title 4E or 4B, you can look at these programs and I believe find federal funds to fund them. I would ask you to ask the department to come back with what federal dollars might be available and not just look at this as a reduction of general funds. I think Supervisor Chavez did talk about one time how you need to see the total budget of these departments. And this is a good example of asking the department for all their sources so you can see there are other funds available to fund these agencies. Thank you.
Our next speaker is Scott Largent. I am unmuting you. Please accept the unmute. You will have 1 minute to speak. The timer will start when you begin speaking.
Thank you, everyone. As I look more and more over the budget cuts for different departments and of course social services, you know I'm just getting scared. I'm getting scared that I will never be able to be a father, and I know you guys are just sick of hearing me say this stuff. Bob, why was I never assigned a social worker? Why could my visitation never have been done through the social services agency? You guys provide visitation for a lot of different people. Everything has been cut off through the courthouse right now. So there's no supervised visitation for any clean and sober parents. It's all been cut off. How can we ride the coattails of social services agency, the Department of Child Support Services? What do we need to do to be able to see our kids right now? I'm worried that none of this is going to pan out right now. I know we're fighting for crumbs right now. Can we get creative with it? I'm in a panic mode right now. You guys can kind of tell that I'm starting to become manic. I haven't seen my child now in 4.5 months right now. It's eating me up. It's killing me inside, but there's thousands of people like me. Let's figure something out.
Our next speaker is Wendy Ho. I am unmuting you. Please accept the unmute. You will have 1 minute to speak. The timer will start when you begin speaking.
Good afternoon, Supervisors. Wendy Ho with the Silicon Valley Council of Nonprofits. On behalf of FCCN, we were disappointed to see a number of CBO contracts and DFCS that are being recommended for termination or right sizing. We are sensitive to the seemingly impossible choices you have to make to close the budget gap, but as partners in the local safety net, affected CBOs must be part of the conversations on solutions. To our knowledge, none of the CBO providers whose contracts are on the line today were notified by the department about these proposed changes. That is a process of failure. We were further dismayed that in the staff memo outlining the recommended cuts, there were no details about the potential child and senior impacts. By cutting these contracts, there will definitely be impacts to the children served in these programs provided by our CBO community. The board and the public need information about the impacts of safety net cuts on our community so we can make informed decisions. Again, we call on the county to issue budget-related communications to CBOs in a timely manner so they can adequately plan and ensure the continuity of service. Thank you.
The next speaker is Linda Stewart. I am unmuting you. Please accept the unmute. You will have 1 minute to speak. The timer will start when you begin speaking.
Thank you. My name is Linda Stewart, and I'm speaking on item 121. I'm a member of Surge at Sacred Heart, and I live in District 4. I urge the Board of Supervisors to reverse its June 23rd decision and restore full funding for immigrant services during this budget revision. I was thrilled to hear earlier this afternoon that funding for the Rapid Response Network had been restored, but that's not enough. There are additional vital community organizations that rely on county budget to provide necessary services. As I'm sure you're aware, immigrants remain our most vulnerable neighbors. Both documented and undocumented immigrants have been disproportionately affected by the pandemic, the ensuing economic downturn, and the lack of childcare and no schooling outside the home. The June budget cuts undermine services that our communities desperately need to survive. Thank you for restoring funding to the Rapid Response Network. Now, please take the next step and restore full funding and reverse the June 23rd decision. Thank you.
Our next speaker is Melanie. I am unmuting you. Please accept the unmute. You will have 1 minute to speak. The timer will start when you begin speaking. Melanie, are you there? Melanie is not unmuting. That is the final speaker on public comment for this item, Madam President.
Thank you very much. I'm going to now go back to see if there are any comments from my colleagues. I know that Supervisor Cortese is addressing the fire in his district. I'll go to Supervisor Ellenberg.
Thank you. Again, I'm going to reference the same impact statement. This time for item 121, the child impact statement reads that the recommended action will have no/neutral impact on children. And that simply can't be true. How could a cut of $750,000 to contracts not impact children or families? It was frustrating to have to ask my team to do a lot of additional work to try to determine the impact of cutting these contracts without a transparent and thorough analysis from the departments that provide services to children. My expectation is that once the Office of Children's Policy is stood up, that office be tasked with reviewing the child impact statements and in fact helping departments write more transparent ones. Santa Clara County is well known around the country for being one of the only counties to have these impact statements, but truly they're meaningless if they do not provide a thoughtful analysis of actual impact. Specifically regarding item 121, cuts and reductions to current contracts in DFCS, each of these contracts provides enormous value to the population that it serves. And in a time where we are struggling to get quality distance learning education services to kids in safe and stable homes, it is frightening to think that we are cutting the resources that privileged families are able to access, such as the Morrissey Compton Education Center. These kids, our kids, need legal advocacy for education supports. They need assistance to clear their credit history in order to rent a place to live. These provider contracts represent small dollars in terms of county revenue, but are leveraged and used to provide broad services, such as in the case of Bill Wilson, and yes, often at a lower cost than the county can provide. Our CBOs are better positioned than any of us here to meet the specific needs of vulnerable community members. They are trusted, connected, and scrappy. They're more nimble than we are, can match our funds with private and other public dollars, and make money go further. We need these partners, and I don't want to see us cut their contracts. Regarding item 125, the deletion of eligibility workers. During a global pandemic where unemployment is the highest it has ever been, and we are seeing an increase of applications for the resources and supports that DEB provides, as reported by Director Minicaci at a BOS meeting during the public health report in May. Why would we cut 15 positions to assist people with unemployment? That question is actually not rhetorical. Could I get an answer on why we would cut 15 eligibility workers when the documented need has increased substantially?
Sure. Yeah, I'd be happy to. So with all the things that you mentioned, we share all the same concerns in terms of the importance of the services. And what we tried to do in each of these instances was to look at areas where we knew to the best extent we weren't going to have impact. So in this particular case, these are currently vacant positions. And I think as we've been able to report and provide in the dashboards in terms of the timeliness that we are turning around our applications on, that is with our current staffing service level. That includes those positions that are currently not occupied. So that our current service level is with the staff that we have on hand. The other thing I would mention is that what we're trying to do in this case is really right size our staffing under the Medi-Cal program. We had staffed up around the inception of the ACA and brought on a lot of staff to surge and get through that backlog so that folks could have a timely access to their benefits. And since that time, that particular piece of the caseload impact has declined. So that need for that level of staffing isn't necessarily there. And the other part of that is, when we staffed up, it was with the promise that the state was going to come in and fund that, and they never did. So some of the staffing that we have on hand to serve on the Medi-Cal side is at 100% county cost. So what we're trying to do is correct that overstaffing that we have on that side. The other thing I would just add is, in particular, as part of the application surge that we have seen with COVID, CalFresh was definitely the area where we saw the biggest surge, and that was in the order of magnitude around 30% increase. On the CalWorks and Medi-Cal side, we haven't seen that level of surge. We do not know what the future does hold, and I'll certainly give everybody that to say we're hoping for the best, that we can turn this around, that unemployment recovers, things like that, and be able to address it with the current staffing levels that we have. And the same is true on the contracts. I absolutely agree with what you're saying. They're vital services. We respect the services that are delivered. Again, what we're trying to do is just achieve reductions where we're essentially holding on to money that the budget can't afford to be held on to. What we want to be clear about is what is the actual spending on these contracts and right-size the contracts for that. So the issue of saying that there isn't necessarily an impact is in this case, what we're just trying to do is to match the contracts to the current level of service, that is the current expenditure level under those contracts.
So Bob, I appreciate the response on the eligibility workers. I want to push back a little bit with the contractors. First, I am very frustrated that, again, it seems that we didn't reach out and discuss potential cuts or concerns with the CBOs if Wendy Ho's statement was accurate. That's a concern. And we also, well, I should ask, did we discuss with them at any point why there was underutilization? Again, we know the need is there. And if underutilization is because these organizations lacked the capacity to do more, then we should be supporting them to be able to expand and perform the services that are so necessary and that are part of our responsibility, rather than pulling back the money that hasn't yet been spent.
And I would say we actively attempt to do that between the work that we do with our Office of Contracts Management in terms of utilization. They review that on a regular basis and work with our program managers to ensure that we have an understanding of what the issues are, what the problems are, if there are barriers, are there things that we can correct. And generally, our program managers work hard with our providers to troubleshoot anything along those lines. I agree. The time pressures that we are under this round of cuts certainly wasn't the process that we would like to have in terms of having those types of conversations. What we know is we have a second round of cuts coming through that our targets will be due to OVA towards the end of September. And our commitment and our direction to our staff has been to do exactly that, to apply the racial equity lens to the work that we're doing, to really try to bring that into our practice. And like I said, this is definitely an imperfect process right now, given the time constraints and the need to do some of this work quickly. And I think we can definitely improve upon it.
And not only apply the race and equity lens, which I wholly support, but engage the organizations that are directly impacted. Get their input and feedback. They may have suggestions that are much more cost efficient, that make recommendations that wouldn't have occurred to us. We're not running their businesses, and we have time. We make time for the things that are most important to us, and these relationships should be among the most important to us. I want to move on to, I have a couple other comments on items in this bunch. 126, certainly in every budgetary crisis, organizations always want to cut their comms department, sometimes under the mistaken logic that comms are not essential or critical. This is nearly always a mistake, particularly as a government agency providing services to the community. We know, and unfortunately this afternoon's fire communications are an example of what happens when communication is not effective or goes awry. Communication is essential to alerting and connecting residents with services. And it's great that OPA has agreed to take on the extra work. But what I'd like to know is how OPA is currently impacted by the COVID-19 crisis and their responsibilities with the Emergency Ops Center, and how they will be impacted for the duration of the health crisis. And will they have if they'll still have staff members working in the EOC through the duration, I'm not confident that they're going to be able to offer adequate coverage for SSA as well. Can someone address this comms question and real importance of being effectively communicative, again, combating the COVID-19 health crisis, in my view, is our priority number one, and we can only be successful if we have both the health and the communications resource in place. And this move feels counterintuitive. So I'll pause for an answer as to whether we can maintain these positions or at a minimum have administration defund but not delete the positions and report back in November with updated recommendations as to whether they are needed for effective COVID-19 communication. I'm not sure who to direct that to. Someone from OPA.
Well, I can talk about central communications.
Thank you.
We're currently in the process of reorganizing what's going on in the EOC, and so we do anticipate staff going back to central communications, and the position that Bob's talking about is a vacant position. So we will be able to continue with our external communications with EOC and be able to take over more responsibility for social services. I'm not saying it's ideal, but we are in a position where we need to maximize our efficiency, and we don't have as much, obviously, to spread around as we'd like.
I appreciate hearing that. Then I would like to just reiterate the ask for the prior to the November budget to report back with updated recommendations on whether communications positions need to be replaced, specifically with regard to effective COVID-19 communication, please.
Will do.
All right, that is all I have. Thank you so much.
Supervisor Simidian or Wasserman?
No comments, Madam Chair. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Supervisor.
No comments, and you are correct.
Thank you. I just wanted to raise a few issues. One is that we have been working and did a referral on a diagnostic center, and it occurs to me that with the work, there's a lot of work being done around children and how we're approaching children in need. And initially, I had been pressing staff to get the diagnostic center work done really months ago. And I do want to just say that I recognize that we're really stretching the, Dr. Smith, your office like a drum. And so this is not a complaint about the timing. It is more a concern that the diagnostic center doesn't have a placeholder in the budget to match up with when staff's going to be ready to present an idea. So what I'm interested in understanding, and I'm fine to get this information on Friday, is what do we anticipate the ETA to be on the diagnostic center, and how would we put resources aside? Like, what would the source of Marianne, I'm going to put you on mute. What would the source of the funds be if we pursue that? And is that something, because we're looking at both it's got a social services model, but it's also a medical model that needs to have more research in terms of the opportunities for getting funding, frankly, outside of our general fund?
Exactly. The reason we don't have it here is because we don't have a reliable idea of costs, nor do we have a reliable idea of a funding source. And what we're thinking about doing our plan would be to reassess either in November or February when we have a better idea of funding. This sort of goes also to the issue that we talked about yesterday related to Medi-Cal funding. We think there's a possibility that we can get the Medi-Cal funding to pay for the model, but it's still uncertain from the state's actions exactly what'll happen. So it is the third part of your question is exactly the operating fact. We don't have sufficient information right now to give you a recommendation, and we have not, it's not come off our list. It's definitely a thing that's to do. It's definitely a high priority, but we envision having more information in November, particularly after we know what happens with the state triggers.
What I would like to recommend is that rather than keep this body of work in-house, that we look to contract with some of the partners that are working with us on this to get that research done on our end. That my concern is that we just don't have capacity.
Okay, we'll look into it.
Is it possible for us to do that by Friday?
Honestly, I don't think so. We could certainly get something reasonable by the second meeting in September.
Great, that's fine. That's fine. I think we have a good set of partners, and I want to take this off of the staff person who's got this now, not because they're not doing a fantastic job. They just have to sleep, right? And so, and yet we don't want to miss an opportunity as all this realignment I foresee happening, that we're not ready to go is my worry. So thank you, that's helpful. One thing I do want to follow up on a point that Susan raised, and that is I really do agree with Susan that, you know, as we're continuing to make cuts, we really are going to be restructuring the organization. And I think that's why you hear us, all of us, talking about how positions should be handled. But I appreciate that we really want to make sure we're having conversations with our nonprofit partners. I think that's true for our county employees as well. I think, you know, we just want the best ideas irrespective of where they come from, and we want to engage the community. I think one opportunity that SSA has really above all others is you've got these incredible working groups that you're working with on prevention and other areas that I just want to encourage you to engage with, because I do think I recognize these cuts are going to get worse, and so making sure that you're able to have those conversations I think is just going to be really important. So I wanted to just support that, but also to add that we should and I will also say this, that I really appreciate our nonprofit partners. I appreciate our employees too, and I want to make sure that we continue to work toward a culture that just engages the people who are doing the work, irrespective of their who they're hired by. On the Deb's report on the deletion, and I apologize, Susan, I think you were talking about item 125, and was that right? That was it when you raised?
125 was the eligibility workers, 126 was the communications specialist.
Thank you. On 125, the one point I wanted to make about this is that the staff report actually indicates that the negative impact here will be on CalFresh.
Yeah, what we're saying is, as our primary impacted area, what we don't know, since that's really where we're seeing the biggest impact, is that's our highest risk area in terms of that broad statement around, you know, as we reduce our footprint, you know, if we didn't, we would have more flexibility to staff up in different areas. So if we're going to continue to see a surge in that area, we will lose a little bit of that flexibility, and that could be the biggest impact in that area.
Thank you. That's really helpful, because you know, one of the things that I think we're going to have to really double down on is making sure people have food, especially if the economy continues to go in the direction it goes, because I think we're going to need to be feeding people even as the economy rebounds. And so CalFresh is our one big opportunity. And so what I would like to request is that the discussion about how multiple emergencies are going to be impacting the food sources when the food report comes back to the board, and I think that's coming back in September. If we could also include a discussion about CalFresh and how that CalFresh service will continue to be provided, I think that might help address any future cuts. And I would put this in the category of, again, why I don't want to cut the positions. I'd rather unfund them, and that way, if you found flexibility within your budget where you were going to maybe not need another set of workers, that it would give you the flexibility to work with the community and the labor movement to restructure those, I think would be valuable. But I understand you don't have a lot of good choices, Bob. I know you didn't want to do any of this, so that's let me just say that. Let me just go to the contracts with the nonprofits. One question I have is, and I appreciate the point you're raising. You're saying these were unutilized dollars. My question is, how did COVID-19 impact utilization of those resources?
So it's going to vary contract to contract, obviously, in terms of the type of service and the access that they had. But we did take that into account in terms of looking at the overall performance of the contracts over a period of time. So it wasn't just a point in time, what we might be experiencing, say, this past fiscal year, and using that information. We would do a look back on those contracts, average that out, take into account if something seemed out of the norm for this year, we wouldn't take that into account in terms of the reduction that we are proposing. So
one of those that is a little concerning to me, or maybe one that I would like us to, there's a number of these that I have concerns about, but one in particular is around the Educational Rights Project. And since one of our highest obligations is to make sure that foster youth have access to education, what I'm concerned about here is that this could only have been impacted by COVID-19 in terms of us not being able to access, children as we're trying to provide support to them. So my concern is that we're trying to address truancy abatement and other items. That cutting this contract doesn't make sense relative to other policy work that you're pursuing.
Yeah, I understand that, and again, I don't know that we're taking that fully into account in terms of the impact of just this this year.
Yeah, I hear what you're saying. I understand your point. Thank you for that, and thanks for letting me get some feedback from you. All right, so with that, I don't see any other comments or questions from my colleagues. And what I'd like to do is ask for direction. Supervisor Simidian.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I was just going to ask, do we have a motion on the floor, or are we still just at questions and comments?
I was going to get to the motion right now.
Thank you so much.
Would anybody like to make a motion?
Thank you.
Do we have a motion, Supervisor Ellenberg?
Sure, I'm happy to make a motion for the purposes of voting. I want to make clear also that I'm going to vote no on 120, but yes on the remainder.
Okay, so your motion is to move all of the items but 120.
Correct.
But
or to move all of, yeah. So okay, can I separate out the 120?
You right. Can. Do you want to take a different action with 120?
Yeah. So why don't I move ahead to Friday 121 through 140 through 136. Let's start with that. 121 through 136.
Okay. So we have a motion for 121 through 136. We have a second. Any discussion on that motion? I see Supervisor Simidian's hand up and Supervisor Wasserman's hand.
Forgive me, Madam Chair, I raised my hand earlier. I think maybe it just didn't get taken down.
Oh, sorry about that. I will lower your hand. All right, Supervisor Wasserman.
Thank you. And my hand says it is down. I just
It is,
seconded
but
her
you did
motion.
this. Okay,
Yes.
okay. So we have a motion and a second. Any discussion on the motion? Seeing none, I will now go to a roll call vote.
Supervisor Ellenberg,
Yes.
Supervisor Simidian,
Aye.
Supervisor Cortese is absent. Vice President Wasserman,
Aye.
President Chavez.
Yes.
Thank you.
Item 120, Supervisor Ellenberg.
I'm not making a motion on this.
Okay, do we have a motion on item 120? So I would move item 120 to Friday, but to fund those contracts, as I'm concerned about some of them, and I can't decouple all of them. So meaning I'm concerned that we didn't take into account COVID-19. So I would move to leave that in and move that to Friday for further discussion. If anybody wants to.
As currently, as without the reductions, or
Yes.
as without the reductions, I would second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Any discussion on that? Supervisor Wasserman.
I did.
So proud of you. There you go.
Thank you. Okay, on the one hand, on the other hand, I think what Bob's doing is great. I think what our private sector partners are doing is great. I think the need we have is great. And yet we got to cut $750,000. So is the motion, President Chavez, to come back with alternative ways, alternative cuts? What is the motion?
No, I'm moving this to Friday to be considered with everything else. And so if on Friday, and I haven't worked with Dr. Smith on this, but I think what we're going to do on Friday is we'll do what we've been doing, which is take those areas where we have unanimity and then debate the ones where we don't. So I'm moving this to Friday for two reasons. One, it's going to give me a chance to unknot the contracts where I believe that the reason the money wasn't spent had more to do with COVID-19. I use the Law Foundation as an example of one where it doesn't make sense in my mind to make that cut, given that we're trying to get kids to go to school, and this goes from my perspective in the area of prevention, and it appears that cut, if it's made because the money was unspent, was because we had a hard time working with kids over the last few months. So it's going to give me a chance to review those more thoroughly. But it would be to not make these cuts and to essentially move this to Friday for a second look by the board.
So there is no ask in your motion of administration for any other solution?
No, I actually need to review them point by point based on the feedback I got today.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. So we have a motion to have no reduction here, but to have it go to Friday for discussion. So if the board wants to change their mind, they can do that, just as we've taken this action on other items. So that's my motion. We have a second from Supervisor Ellenberg. Any other discussion on the motion? Supervisor Simidian, there you go.
Thank you. Supervisor Chavez, just toss out one other possibility for action on Friday might be to continue the item to our mid-year budget if that proved necessary as a way to flesh out the issues. This was the approach that we discussed earlier on the $400,000 for the community health partners. So I'm not suggesting that. I'm not even sure I think it would be a good idea. I just toss that into the mix.
Got it. And maybe if we can include that in the motion as an alternative for discussion on Friday, that's fine with me as the maker. Is that okay with the seconder? Excellent. So we have a motion and a second. Can I get a roll call vote?
Supervisor Ellenberg,
Yes.
Supervisor Simidian,
Yes.
Supervisor Cortese is absent. Vice President Wasserman,
Aye.
President Chavez.
Yes.
Thank you.
And I just wanted to acknowledge, I appreciate Supervisor Wasserman and Simidian, you being here. I know that you also have fire issues, I think, Mike, in your area, but just to acknowledge that Supervisor Cortese is away because his district is having a natural disaster. So thank you for.
Yeah, and his home.
Yeah. So we're going to go to item 147, and are there any items of concern to any of my colleagues that they would like to raise at this time? Seeing none, I have one, and that is that we had a pay equity study referral that went on that was, I apologize, I can't remember how long ago it was. I think this was the one that was in April. And I had been told earlier that the pay equity study money was in our budget. I've now been told that it's not in our budget. I'd like a report back from staff on Friday, just letting us know if that is or isn't accurate. I know that it's about $150,000 small relative to the dollars that we're dealing with overall. So I understand how it could have gotten lost in the shuffle, but I'd like a report out on Friday to make sure that I know where and if that's being funded. All right. If any of my colleagues have concerns about that, seeing none. All right, we're going to go then to recess. I want to thank my colleagues very much, and have a good evening and a safe evening, everyone. And we will see you Friday at 1:30.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Well.